Recently, I went and walked out on a stage, opened my mouth, and a bunch of words for approximately 15 minutes spilled out of my mouth without hardly any thought about it. And then at the end, a bunch of people clapped, and then I went home. And the beauty of it is it happened because I have a strategy. I have a number of memory strategies, and stress-free, totally blissful, perfectly wonderful in memory to think back about all the times that I've gone and walked into a room and been able to remember all the names of people and speak to them from memory without notes because of memory strategy. And so many people are suffering so badly in life because they do not have a strategy. So on today's live stream, we are going to make sure that those who have eyes to see and ears to hear have every opportunity in the world to develop, to cultivate, to craft, to bring into their lives memory strategy, which is a very, very important thing to do. So what is memory anyway? Well, it's mindfully retaining and recalling information. And strategy is the science and the art of planning movements and operations to achieve specific goals and results. And this is very, very, very important because a lot of people don't think of strategy for what it is. Strategy really is a science. It really is an art, and it is to get yourself to move, to take the motions, to set up operations that help you achieve specific goals and results. So that story I just told of walking out onto a stage and speaking was the operation, and the result, the goal, was to be able to communicate a message. And all of that happened on pretty much autopilot simply because of the role of strategy in this particular sense. There was a planning of the movement. There was a planning of the operations that led to those individual movements, and there was a specific goal and a result that I was looking for. And it all happens because of memory being the mindful retention and ability to recall information on demand being set up in advance. So David is in the house. Good to see you, David. Thanks for saying hello. Jose says, Anthony, I'm new to your channel and taking your course to memorize vocabulary. Excellent. And you say you're looking forward to learning more and more. Thank you, Jose, for being here. Good to see you. If you're joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And let me know in the chat, what memory strategies do you already have? Because we're diving deep into ones that you might not have thought of. And maybe you'll know some of them, but you'll certainly not know all of them. And I've got to say that the more you put into these live sessions while we're here together, the more you get out of them. And then, of course, the more people get out of them from the replays. And, progressively these replays will be disappearing from the channel. So, make sure to catch up on any old ones that you might have missed, because there's no guarantee that they will be here forever. And they will, of course, be absorbed somewhere else. All right. Now, speaking of things being absorbed somewhere else, YouTube recently enabled the supporter join membership thingamajigger. I think they need to give us some optimization to name it as we wish. But if you would like to become a supporter, that is wonderful, 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 because we actually do need your support, because I am going through right now this wonderful book for the third time called The Art of Memory. And it occurred to me that this is where we need to go. We need to dig deep into this. So stay tuned for a video coming called The Art of Memory, but more than a video, an entire series on the book, because I think that is needed. But the depth of which we go into the series will be guided by you and the amount of support that we're receiving. And that can be in terms of thumbs up. It can be in terms of comments. It can be in terms of hard, sort of contributions to this new thing they've enabled there with the memberships. We'll see how it goes. But I would like to do the whole thing, and I think I would need to hire a second editor to make it happen in the best possible way. So stay tuned for that. Now, I also mention this because one of the strategies that you're going to want to have is being a student of memory. And there's issues with Yeats. She was not exactly correct about Bruno. Her Bruno thesis, as it's called, is deeply problematic, and I realize now why her critics were critical of her after having finished reading Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic tradition, which of course is going to be part of this series, because you almost can't understand one without the other, and you can't quite reconcile them, what Yeats is going on about. And the other problem with Art of Memory is that Yeats says point blank she never used the memory techniques, and you can see it in how that she's puzzling around through them and she misses a number of things. But nonetheless, it's still one of the best books, and the most important thing is that she opens a discourse. Now, we also know that it's not a Western Greek tradition, and Lynn Kelly has done a lot of work for us to help unpack that in the memory code and also memory craft. So make sure that you get these texts so that you get the most out of the new series that I'm working on, and make sure I hear loud and clear that you like it, that you care about it, so that I continue to complete the series, because the first video or 3 will be a test of your interest. All right, DA Lit is in the house. Says, great to see you again. Great to see you. Thank you for being here. If you're just joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Make this engaging for yourself and others by being involved in the chat, and let's watch the 80-20 rule play out. All right, so the number one strategy that we got to talk about, we're going to dig deep into it today, is self-directed education. It is historically the most important strategy. And listen, there's no self, right? There's no individual person who is all alone. But there are some people who are a little bit more individual than others, but their individuality is conditioned upon their assemblage with the whole. So you see 80-20 rule distributions everywhere. And so those towering figures of individuality are that way by virtue of this rule and how that it expresses itself. And it's very fractal in many, many ways. But you might think of Wyndham Lewis, who basically said, if you have to be an island unto yourself, you may as well be a volcanic island. And this is somewhat of a Neoplatonic image, really, when you think about it, because a volcanic island, right? Yes, it's all on its own, and it's got this expressive force and power and all this sort of stuff, but it is contingent upon being such a powerful configuration of many, many things that are attached to the center of the world. This is where the lava is coming from, right? So the central is the center is always attached to a periphery, and a periphery is really the production of its relationship to the center. Anyway, I know that's all super intellectual and so forth, but at the end of the day, the whole point is that that's what this is ultimately all about. And it's also about understanding, and the correct things about Bruno are understanding that it is appearing in one place and one place alone. And that is you, and your fitness for perceiving it has to do with how much you take the reins of your own education and you be strategic about it. You fill in the gaps, and you don't go around looking for handouts, and you make it happen, and you are a serious student. So this is the number one memory strategy that links them all. Be self-directed. Learn how to become self-directed. And, that doesn't mean that you are alone. Don't understand it as some sort of solipsism, as some sort of solo thing. It is deeply collaborative. It is deeply connected. It's an assemblage. And it's very, very important to see that. And so I would encourage you to understand how that works and look into assemblage theory if you haven't already. Now, before we get started, a few announcements. I have the street team going. Thanks to everybody who's already on the street team at magneticmemorymethod.com/VM. We recently did the cover reveal. We did a walkthrough of some memory palaces, or a memory palace, but you'll see why I say some memory palaces, because everything can be quite rapidly expanded. And also I did the cover reveal, the title reveal, and all this sort of stuff. Thanks to everybody who said thumbs up on that. So I'm very excited to get that book out to you. If you're not part of the street team yet, please go to the link there, magneticmemorymethod.com/VM, and join up. Also, I mentioned that I'd given a talk, and there's the only photo I have so far. courtesy of my wife. I'm sure there's more coming, but the video, everybody's emailing me, when's the video coming out? And it'll apparently be in about a month. So that would be less than a month now, but we'll see. There's no real particular rush, but I appreciate everybody's interest in that. One thing that I'm planning when it comes out is I will do a walkthrough of the talk and how I memorized it using memory strategies. And yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. All right, another announcement. There's a new Nelson Dellis book coming. If you haven't heard of that, then you know, now you know. And this is very, very exciting. So I want to lend some steam to his progress and thank Nelson. Actually, he wrote a nice recommendation for my next book, which you can get advanced previews of and the cover and the title reveal and all that jazz at magneticmemorymethod.com/VM. But be a supporter, of course, of all memory initiatives out there. These people are doing so much to improve our chances as a species to actually survive and not destroy ourselves. Now, speaking of survival, thanks to everybody who saw this post on the community tab. Stay tuned, because this is Michael Swain, and he and I are releasing some videos together. I'm going to still be a little bit mysterious about what those videos are, but we're going to be very, very excited to see how you all like them. And one of the things that Michael and I are doing is related to something that Jonathan and I do, and Jonathan and I have released the first episode of our new podcast together. So if you haven't seen it yet, hop on over there and at least bookmark it for later. So we would love to know what you think. And if you're interested in doing something together like Michael and I are doing, then, you know, this is not exactly The Apprentice, but reach out, because part of my initiative and some of the things that Jonathan and I talk about are how can we make the next generation of highly competent educators who are able to actually, you know, grow their own classrooms, so to speak, how to make their message heard. And in the case of the memory world, there is some opportunity, as Michael is doing, to work directly with me as a kind of apprenticeship that could be wildly fulfilling for the right person. So be in touch about that and stay tuned for what Michael and I are releasing. All right, let's get into the meat of all this. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And the first memory strategy that I have for you is have a long-term learning project or projects, but try to just have the discipline of having one long-term learning project. So in the case of my current long-term learning project, and I do have several, but they're all intertwined. They all go together. There's the art of memory, right? So the art of memory is, as we saw here. And this is a very, very elaborate, deep, long-term learning project that I've been going on about for years. And why is this a memory strategy? Well, we'll get into why. And it's your best bet to fortify your brain for life. And it can get into language learning. So, for example, I've been learning a ton of Sanskrit to get at the core of memory, right? And music. Music is involved in this. There's also just professional focus. But the point is what you want to do, if you're a medical professional already or you're studying medicine, you turn that into a long-term project than you anticipated. So how to be the best possible profession? Know a little bit about the history of medicine, for example. How to be a better lawyer? Know a little bit about the history of the law. I'm sure they make you do some of that in law school and medical school, but even be better. Find the clues as a long-term project. So what that might look like, say if you're a medical doctor, you might then say, well, I'm going to make a long-term learning project about medicine in the Renaissance or something like that. Maybe even more specific, the Italian Renaissance. And now you're building a concrete set of things to study that you plan out over time. And this is going to create a foundation, a field, a basis for so many connections in your neuronal networks that is just going to flower over time. It's going to be a field in which you plant so many seeds, and this garden will be so much more robust and intertwined and interconnected because you have a long-term learning project that is itself segmentable and will segment itself. It'll be a hydra like you've never seen if you really focus on it. I mean, just think of this. You know, this is just one book of tens of thousands to go through. So it bifurcates in many, many unanticipated ways. There's nothing to be lost from having a long-term focus. And what this does is it essentially teaches you how to focus. So in the giant link repository underneath this video, you have all kinds of resources. They're not just to other videos of mine, but to many, many others. And you can start to follow through on this. But one thing that you need to understand is that by focusing on long-term projects, you're going to extend your concentration on something called cognitive shifting. Now, this is not multitasking. This is not task switching. Task switching is sometimes misunderstood. Task switching is an unconscious process, and multitasking can be unconscious, but it's ultimately a conscious thing. But cognitive shifting is the ability to very consciously shift gears and do so in a way that does not disrupt your focus. It is not consequential in any way. It's not cost. It doesn't incur a cost. It actually creates more energy than it burns. So you can look into this, and this is going to come not from practicing task switching or multitasking. It's going to come from focus on a singular thing and noticing that there is no singular thing, because it's always going to bifurcate. So Anthony Morrison is in the house. Good to see you. Anniversary Morrison, he says. Okay, great. And we see Virgil here from Northern Utah. Thanks for saying hello. Good to see you. So I hope that's clear. And you want to do your own research into what task switching is and cognitive shifting and so forth. But one of the wonderful, wonderful things that you need to understand is that there is a thing called cognitive shifting, and you need to master it in order to be at the top of your game. You need to be able to switch gears on a dime while maintaining your focus to be the best possible learner. And this is how you do it. Long-term projects that will naturally bifurcate and teach you to focus, to juggle multiple threads. It's very, very powerful. And again, it's just one of those things that some will do and some won't. But those who do are richly rewarded for years, because it develops memory reserve, or what is sometimes called cognitive reserve. And it leads to long-term fortification of the brain against damage, essentially. So, you don't have to take my word for it. There's a link in the link repository to just one of many, many studies. This one is on measuring cognitive reserve, to show you how they measure it, that it can be measured. And in your own life, you can measure it yourself. You will feel this if you do long-term learning projects. You'll feel the focus that evolves from it. And especially if you journal it and, have some KPIs that you want to meet, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Tox is here. He says, when is your book coming out? We've been waiting. Well, there's been a lot of snakes and ladders with it that have set things back and forward and so forth, but it should be April 30th. So thank you for asking, Tox. I really appreciate it. And stay tuned for that. There may be pre-orders sooner, but I really appreciate all the interest and all the questions that I've been getting about it. And rest assured that every little bit of extra elbow grease we're putting into it is going to pay off, because I have a thesis about this, and we can talk about that if you're on the street team. So go to magneticmemorymethod.com/VM if you're not on the street team to be notified first. Already, the wonderful members of the street team have had a number of treats in advance, and so I hope that you will join them as well, because there's already some stuff there for you and more to come. There will be, maybe even as early as today, a extract from the audiobook, so you don't want to miss that. All right, so a lot of people say, yeah, well, what about focusing on games for the long term as a memory strategy? And, you can if you want. I don't really have a dog in the game of what you do, other than the whole species has a dog in the game of what you do. So I hope that you won't. But I don't know. I don't know all the be all and the end all of everything. And obviously we need some people to be spending time on those games to get a picture of just how destructive they are. But I don't really know. But one way to think about this is content is king, but context is God. Okay? So what do I mean by that? Well, if you really want to have memory strategies, is it likely that you're going to get it from looking behind tiles for objects, or, mixing and matching little things on the screen and tap, tap, tippity, tap, tap? Is that really likely? No, because it has no content. Your memory is about content in context, right? So it really does matter what the content is. It is the king that will rule your life. but it's the context that is going to dictate your fate, right? It is very, very important. Very important, right? So one thing that you might ask, and this is to Virgil's question here, about what about coding languages and programming? Well, coding languages and programming is not a game, right? It's not an app that you play games in, although I am aware that there are coding training games that are gamified and apped. So, and they are in apps, right? So look, let's not get lost in the realm of words and taxonomies of, well, is this an app or whatever? We think we understand what a game is, right? A game, and especially in the memory world where they sell them as a memory thing, the game is typically this sort of thing where, you're going to rotate shapes on the screen and you're going to remember where squares were, and then things are going to be hidden behind tiles, all this stuff. Crap, in my view. I don't know, though. I mean, I'm a scientific-minded person. They could be right. However, we have a piece coming out about this, and I looked in detail at some of these sites. And on them, you'll look at their scientific references, and they are referencing things scientifically that have nothing to do with their claims, right? So one of the problems that you'll see in science all the time is that it's very easy for people to just grab this or that reference and, I find that persuasive, but if you actually look at it, you scratch your head and go, why are they citing this? That has nothing to do with, and it in no way substantiates your claims that playing this stupid game is going to improve my memory. It's often weird seniors with some disease that it's just garbage. So stay tuned for that piece. And there's a lot of problems in how science is used. So really, the question for our purposes when it comes to the answer, is playing games a long-term memory strategy, is does it educate? If so, how does it educate? And is that related to what we know about cognitive reserve and what we know about, these skills that we need, the real skills that we need? So this is a very, very important question. It's up to you to answer it. My opinion doesn't matter. Obviously, I'm a flawed, biased human being who, sing, O muse, the vengeance deep and deadly, whence to Greece unnumbered ills arose. This is the vengeance that I have against these stupid games and apps, especially when the companies making them are so egregiously in violation of common sense in the way that they're citing memory science. They're not even remotely interrogating what it is that they're citing, and that's because they're corporations. What do you expect? In any case, Austin is in the house. Good evening, Austin. Talk says, knowing a memory method is key, but combining all the methods to archive your goals is power. Love that, Talks. Thank you for that. Wonderful. That's exactly what the direction that I like to see. So answer these questions. Does it educate, right? And I don't know. Maybe it does. As you know, as everybody is doomed to be. We are all characters in a play, and part of this is also my deep disappointment that there isn't a game that you could just play and have a better memory. That seems fantastical. Maybe it's coming. Maybe all the research will amount to something in the end. But I think there's a more practical and direct answer to that, and I think we all know it. William S. Burroughs, when pressed to define what the heck the title Naked Lunch meant, he said that naked lunch means the moment when you look at the fork and realize what exactly you've got on it, right? And that reminds me of the Incarnations of Immortality series by Piers Anthony. I don't know if you ever read that, but in the book on the devil, I think it's called For the Love of Evil. I don't remember actually, but I think it's like by the near the end of the series, or at least the end of when I was reading it as a young person. It might not even be that book. No, actually, I don't think it's that book. It might have been the third or the fourth one. But in any case, there's a scene in one of the Incarnations of Immortality, assuming that that's what that series was called. Piers Anthony, anyway. There's a scene in one of those books, and it's a sort of recurring thing throughout the series. They go down into some area that is hell, sort of, and they are eating all this wonderful food. Oh, they're at this banquet restaurant sort of thing, and they're just loving it. And then somehow in this scene, it's revealed what's actually going on, and they're actually eating sewage. They're eating garbage. But they can't see the naked lunch. They can't see what's on the end of their fork. And so this is the problem that we're going to have, is a lot of people are deluded. They are confusing activity with accomplishment, and this scientific app, and I saw an ad, and now look at me, I'm pressing buttons for 3 hours, my memory's better. Well, is it? Will that stand to scrutiny? We shall see. We shall see. There's ways to test it, but so far I don't really see anybody testing it. If you're following the Awakening Memory Meditations project that I have, you'll see a very interesting exchange where I asked some questions about a scientific study, and then somebody poo-pooed all of this. It sounds like you're just sitting there being, cynical about science. No, I'm being scientific. Science asks questions cynically about its own assumptions. That's what it is. I'm not sure what that person wanted, but I got a thumbs up on my answer anyway. I gave them a comeuppance on their poo-pooing, and it seemed to work out just fine with an empty thumbs up. Speaking of which, thumbs up if you're just joining us. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And let's carry on, because the other question you can ask about the apps is, does it include a social function, right? Are you actually engaging with people with the content in a context? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Some of them certainly do lead to chat rooms and all that sort of stuff. But often the social function is limited to a graph readout that shows where you place relative to other people, which should be deeply alarming and shocking to any forward-thinking individual as not at all fulfilling a social function, because that's a game of comparison. That's a game of comparison. Austin Study says, amiable skepticism is a good trait for scientific thought and discussion. Indeed, indeed. Thank you. That is a great way of putting it. I appreciate that. So you can ask to bring all this together with our theme today of memory strategies. Is the game you're playing, is it giving you a strategy, or does the app have a strategy to show you ads and help you confuse activity with accomplishments? Because ultimately, who's playing who? That's what I would ask you to understand and think about the naked lunch, right? What's on the end of the fork? What's really on the end of the fork, right? So with all that said, we know that the real deal is to pick a lifelong learning project for that great fortification of your brain for developing a wider field that can constantly be widened, but also has enough laser-like granular focus to help you really have more than you ever would if you just keep skipping around and so forth. So here's an exercise. Pick one lifelong learning project. And don't worry, it's going to have plenty of variety. If you were to pick the one that I have, which is the art of memory, you will be swamped in variety. Your head is going to be spinning every day, as mine is, and always just breathe, relax, page after page after page, exercise after exercise after exercise, and so forth. And you just follow the adventure, and there is no end to it. And it will create plenty of cognitive shifting. So whatever it is that you choose, be that brave warrior of the mind who is courageous enough to zero in on one thing and be satisfied with the totality of what it is that you're going to get, and let go of the way that most of the people behave, which is to try to have it all and wind up with very little or nothing. Worse, they might even have the illusion that they had more when really they didn't, and inside they're punishing themselves, etc. And so, one thing I think where we can really understand the great Giordano Bruno is just simply don't delude yourself at the end of the day. Avoid self-delusion at all costs. And if you have trouble with, any of this idea of picking one thing, then just simply make sure you go through the free memory vision statement on YouTube while it's still here, because eventually I will take it down, and have at it. Understand why this works, how it works. The link is for you in the great link depository down below. So Adolfo is in the house. Good to see you, Adolfo. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So glad you're here. You are one of the great people who indeed has vision for your learning and passing it forward. So good to see you always, and thanks for the chat a little earlier today. David says, good to see you as well. Thank you, David. Wonderful, wonderful. If you're joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Let's move on to strategy number 2. So structure and organize. The number one thing you can do to help your memory is be a self-organizing structurer, if that's a word. be someone who's interested in structuring things. So one of the number one things you can do is learn about bibliography. Now, I know it's going to sound all old-fashioned, right? Because, wait a second, that's what librarians used to do. Yes, indeed. But imagine if you could structure your mind to think sort of like a library-like way. So, you may have seen on the community tab, we had a little bit of a get-together in Melbourne when I was there with the Magnetic Mary Method family that are there. And we went to a library, of course, because you'd be insane not to, right? But the thing is one of the people who was there, wonderful, was thinking through, imagine if you committed the Dewey Decimal System to memory and used that as a memory palace. And it's just like bang on. That's exactly the way to think about it, right? Do that. And the extent to which that anybody will do that's up to them to work it through, to think it through. And if you know your art of memory, then you know that this is one of the strategies. And it's very, very powerful and empowering. But one of the problems with it is you would have to memorize the Dewey Decimal thing, or you'd have to learn something like the empirical library system, etc., whatever. So does that work or doesn't it work? I don't know, but to think bibliographically is a major tool of structure and organization. To just know the history of how libraries came to be structured as they are will influence you and help you to start structuring your own mind in a particular way. And this is partly what the memory palace technique is all about, is learning how to structure your mind, not just thematically, but bibliographically. So it's not clear yet how to do this on the internet, and I don't think it needs to be necessarily, although even there, you may want to, memorize, for example, your favorite websites so that you don't rely on bookmarks, or at least you can remember what's in your bookmarks. That could be a project, for example, that would help you bibliographically. I've certainly got to explore that more because there's a useless amount of chaos on what you find and how you keep track of what you found on the internet that needs some finesse, to be sure. Now, one of the ways that you can tackle this is having styles of note-taking, several styles. And so this video, Note-Taking Tips, came out recently. You can check that out. Link in the depository below for you if you need it. And you can also mix and match this with our training on memorizing textbooks, which is very, very good. And incidentally, in this video, we shared a cool thing that Adolfo has going on with dice that also will help you structure your mind in a very interesting way. So make sure you check that out. And, there's Adolfo. Go and make sure you get the website version of how to memorize a textbook, because it has a infographic that you can download, as he has. And that whiteboard is going to come up in a minute as well, as a very powerful memory strategy that will help you structure and organize. But those index cards are very, very important. And one of the things that you'll see in that commentary on how to memorize a textbook is that people sort of poo-pooed this technique before they even tried it, right? And they sort of overthought it. And they thought, and on the note-taking technique, there was a fellow who did the old mistake of throwing rocks while living in a glass house. And so some of the comments that people put are quite funny. It's the old, don't knock it before you try it. But man, maybe just think it through before you comment on it too, because sometimes the hilarity of things when people criticize and you look at their own profile photo and you just wonder, really? In any case, one of the things that you need to understand is that you need to be flexible, and one of the best ways to be flexible is to arrest from the material what you're doing so that it can be flexible. So what is the point of taking notes out of a text in such a way that you're actually just making them linear again? There are contexts in which there is a point, but almost every time, having them on movable cards is far superior. And one of the reasons why is because if you're going to memorize the stuff, you want to be able to mix and match and move it around and memorize it in the order quickly that you want it in, as opposed to having to flip around and go, and then you spend so much time locked in the linear mode, locked in the same linear mode that was in the book itself, right? So what you want to do in terms of structuring and organizing your thoughts is maintain some sort of structurableness, an index flex, as I like to think of it, but also that lets you move it around, recombine, and then get it back into that order, right? So to all those who criticized it before trying it, give your head a shake and don't miss this, because it's absolutely astonishingly powerful, and it's congruent with linearity. It just allows you to get things out of linear order and then back into it. Maybe it's just too much common sense. But in any case, it cost me a lot to figure out how to do it. And man, I wish that I had figured it out sooner, because once I had that, it was amazing how explosively fast I was able to read books and remember more out of them. And then, of course, be able to summarize, which is another way of structuring and organizing, right? And what it also helps you do is it helps you use the 80-20 rule to avoid the overwhelm of the masochism that we put ourselves under. Because so many people, and I'll never remember, I think his name was Larry, this guy, well, what about all the zillions of facts that are involved in medical terminology and the medical arts? Yeah, that's just being sadistic and masochistic to yourself. No individual has ever dealt with a zillion facts. That's not even how the collaborative and assemblage-based nature of medicine works. It's just not necessary to think that way. But when you're structured, when you're organized, when you have the memory tools, you're able to get this done in a way that is streamlined, it's strategic, it's organized and organizable. It is something that is so much easier to deal with and memorize. So as an exercise for you, read a book and use the How to Memorize a Textbook methodology. You can watch that using the link below. All right, so we now are about to move on to strategy number 3. Who is alive and awake in our chat today? Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Hit that thumbs up if you're just joining us, and I will get myself a nice little drink. Nothing like water. Gotta love that water. Before I forget, I want to add here and say that loud and clear so it's picked up later, if you know what I mean. Hello, hello. Earth to Jessica. We need to add this. We want to also have as a memory strategy something that is very, very important and powerful, which is called the Memento Mori. So as I take a break to collect my thoughts, a Memento Mori, of course, is something that reminds you that you're going to die. And you are going to die, which is why now is the opportunity to take the chance to get involved in memory and improve your memory. So one of my Memento Moris is Mr. Death here. And he's always on my desk. When I was in my band, I always had him on my bass strap. And this little pin here says, "Catch you later." This is exactly what we all need to always remind ourselves of. We don't get to choose when it's going to happen. We don't get to choose where it's going to happen. We don't get to choose how it's going to happen. But never forget, Mr. Death is always there for you, waiting. And he is going to catch you later. And, that should not terrify you. That should not haunt you. That should be such a comfort. That should be such an amazing miracle of things. Because as I interpret the great Giordano Bruno, there is no death. And there never could be, and there never can be. But, nonetheless, that thing that you think you are, that I, that ego, you think it's going to die. And that causes so much pain, right? Another Memento Mori that can really help you is something like the Amor Fati coin, which is a beautiful thing. And it says there on it, not merely to bear what is necessary, but love it, which is a quote from Nietzsche. And Nietzsche had a wonderful internal Memento Mori, which is known as the myth of the eternal return, which is to say, imagine that, you are going to wake up and live the same day every day for all eternity. How would you live that day? What would you do to make sure that it was not merely tolerable, but that most wonderful day that you would say yes to. Nietzsche, say yes to life. Think of that. This is a very, very important exercise. And so you can have a memento mori or you can have a mental model or whatever, but whatever it is that you do, remind yourself somehow how to say yes to life so that you're not, one of these, oh, poor me little people and, waiting for the world's smallest violin to cry just for you. You've got to have more power like that. Russell is in the house from Alaska. Good to see you, Russell. Thanks for being here today. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing. If you're watching the replay, also likewise, hit the thumbs up. Get involved in the post-show discussion and share this around. Some people say, wow, why don't you have 1 million subscribers and so forth? Well, I guess it's because 1 million people haven't shared it around yet. So, if you care about the memory tradition and the work that's being done here to help it grow, then do your part, please, and do that, sharing around. It really helps. It tells the internet that people care. And unfortunately, as was predicted in the Technological Society by Jacques Ellul back in the 70s, here's what he says. It's quite funny. What a lovely memory, too, to remember this. He says that there's going to come a day when machine A is broken and only machine B can fix it. And so there's going to be a human that brings machine B over to machine A. That, he predicts, is called slavery. So now we're in this kind of life where we have to say, okay, guys, tell the machines that humans care about this stuff so that we might actually have a chance to survive and it's not just robots reading our content. Christian book B.O. with an umlaut K had something called robo-poetics, where he predicted that it was really just the only people that were going to be reading poetry were going to be algorithms, right? And that's not turned out to be totally true, but it's close. Robo-poetics. I love that. Look it up sometime. It's a great essay. All right. Monst is in the house. He says, I made a dictionary, but from the Memory Palace. I place the words and image beside it, so if I'm memorizing a sentence, some words already have an image. Beautiful, Month. Thanks for being with us and sharing that. David says, Carpe diem. Indeed, indeed. Thank you for that. And if you're joining us, do you have a memento mori? Let me know. Question of the day. Do you have something to remind you that Mr. Death is going to catch you later? I've worked with this for years. Michael Roach, also a great teacher of meditation and Tibetan Buddhism and all that jazz. He really switched me on to the fact that the Memory Palace was much older than the Greek tradition, long before Lynn Kelly was talking about it. Or she may have been talking about it, but the memory code was probably not even a thought yet. And he was pointing out, and he teaches a meditation based on using a Buddhist temple. And the third station in that Memory Palace is imagining a black dog nipping at your heels. So when I worked with that meditation, which was for quite an extended period of time, I was always reminding myself that black dog of death is just waiting. And one day it's not going to be a little puppy nipping at your heels, but it's going to be a full-grown adult that wants to eat your face, right? As some dogs will do. Anyway, the whole point is that there's power. And actually, now that I think about it, 59 Seconds with Richard Weissman is a wonderful book to read because it has a funeral exercise in it. So check that out. All right. So let's carry on with memory strategy number 3. Break it down. Now, at some level, this means chunking, right? So chunking means grouping information into units. So not 987.238.034, but 987.238.034. You're breaking it down into smaller, manageable chunks, right? I've never liked that word, chunk, but anyway, that's the word they use. It makes me think of chunky peanut butter, which I just prefer it smooth. In any case, if you add chunking plus mnemonics, so some people think that chunking is a memory strategy, and it is to a certain extent. It's like a management strategy. But when you add the mnemonics, then you have things like a PAO, Dominic system, 00 to 99, all those wonderful things. And that is then chunking plus mnemonics. So, there's many, many ways to apply this breaking down thing. So if you've heard me talk about dedicated practice before as a musical concept applied to memorizing a phrase, you would break the phrase down. So instead of 我们离开以前做了这个事 in Chinese, you would just practice likai, 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 likai ichen, likai ichen, woman likai ichen, like that. And, you make it down into different chunks. And then, eventually you bring back the whole totality of the phrase. And then the next thing you know, you're quite fluid because you've chunked down into the phrase, right? So this is a very powerful thing. And no matter what you do, if you add mnemonics to it, your mnemonics are going to follow that segmentation, that chunking down, or you're going to apply it after you've isolated it. So this is a very, very important strategy. It's a strategy in and of itself, but inside of mnemonics, inside of a memory strategy, it takes on its own dimension because you first divide and then you encode, right? And then you can divide and encode in such a way, like I say, you break it down and you have this unit followed by the unit after, followed by the unit and the unit after and the unit before, or just the unit and the unit before, loop, 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 and then loop, loop, loop. And it's a very simple thing. And yeah, it takes a little bit of time, but man, is it ever powerful for memory. All right, Christopher is in the house from Trinidad. Good to see you, Christopher. Always love seeing your comments. Thanks for being here. Thanks for saying hello. Number 4. Oh, no, we're still here. Exercise. Break it down and use the notes that you've gathered and chunk them. So when you have a bunch of notes, just like we talk about in the How to Memorize a Textbook tradition, we want to, take all our cards, recombine them, chunk them, make it meaningful, useful, put them in memory palaces, and then use that dedicated practice strategy. It's very, very cool. And I love, there's an image that I saw from Timo Han, and he's on our testimonials page, and he showed how he's not only using this just in learning, but it's helping him with his consulting clients because he uses this strategy with the index cards, the index flex, and he chunks it in different ways. And now he's just much, much better getting clients, serving clients, etc. as a consultant. So there's many, many applications for this. All right. Number 4, scheduling. So scheduling is the antidote to cramming. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. When I was going to do my TEDx, I had to schedule it because I have a lot of things going on. Whew. Tons, right? And so how are you going to deal with it all? Very, very simple. Scheduling. Because it would not have been a good idea to cram and do it the night before. Now, I did rewrite a total second new speech, and I sort of limited the amount of time that I had to work on. But the whole point is that I managed to make this work. And it is because even after I changed my mind and did a whole different talk than the one I was planning, I still had time scheduled to fit it in to memorize the second one. So beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right, Chrome Woman Walking is in the house. Good to see you. Thanks for being here, and glad you bought the book. Everybody, if you want to make the most out of the series I'm planning, make sure you have this. How to have it? Physical. I don't think you're going to benefit from this as a Kindle. It's got a lot of diagrams in it and so forth. Plus, you really want to be reading the endnotes. So endnotes are just not fun in digital. I've never seen any sort of endnotes, but this is really, really a required part of this. And the cool thing about endnotes, and I've speculated about this a fair amount, and footnotes as well, and I don't know if it's true, but it seems to me very, very true. And there's something that maps on very nicely with Barbara Oakley's Learning How to Learn philosophy with Terry Sejnowski. Is that right? Terry Sejnowski. Yeah, I think that's the name. So they talk about diffuse thinking and diffuse learning, on, off, on, off. And so let's say you're reading the book, footnote. Now, some people will think this is a distraction, but actually, stress, 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 release, then stress, 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 right? And it's beautiful what it does. It gives you a little bit of off, and then you're back on. And this, it's cognitive switching is what it is. Not task switching, not multitasking, cognitive shifting. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. So That's my recommendation. Get it in print, read in print, big, fat, juicy books. And we already talked about being bibliographical, so organizing and structure and so forth. Understand the power of structure. And that 80-20 rule that we talked about before as well, like one of the number one things that you will do is you will already budget and schedule and plan that what you're going to do is when you read this book, you're going to pick a certain percentage, maybe it's just 1, maybe it's 10 other books to go and read, right? So the debt obviously grows over time. It bifurcates, but you don't have to have it all. Just percentages, and you'll find that you have much, much more as a result. So be strategic in this and schedule, because if you don't schedule, you're never going to get anything done. So like when we think about chunking, we'll make appointments to chunk. And so one of the things that you do is you say, okay, now I'm going to go thoroughly through this list of citations, and I'm going to pick 3 of these books. I'm going to go to the library, and I'm just going to at least look at them, right? Don't have to read it all, but you have to look at them. You have to have them in your hands. You have to go through them. You use priming, etc. And this is really, really powerful because it is a form of now, okay, so I've chunked, so to speak, out of this bibliography 3 books. Now I've gone through the 3 books. I've looked at them, held them in my hand, flipped through the pages, understood that I'm going to at least read chapter 4 out of this title, and then you start to read that chapter, and you've made time for it. And if you don't do that sort of thing, you're going to miss out so much. You're going to have all these shiny new books and, get this and get that and so forth, without a learning project, without a guiding, governing force to help you schedule and follow through and so forth. So it's not about having it all. It's about having crystal focused clarity on these specific goals and in a way that honors the nature of how time works. So you want to divide planning and organization from reading and remembering. So there's the reading part, which you use some sort of device to capture what it is you're going to memorize. And then there's the remembering process, which is where you're going to then commit the things that you've captured to memory. Now you can memorize while you read. There's no two ways about it, and it's fun, but I treat it as a casual thing, and it's subject to error at a higher level than the simple step of extracting the information in the most highly efficient and effective way possible, because efficiency is not necessarily the goal, but effectiveness is. So although you can memorize in real time, you got to recognize a big but here. Without organizing the info and setting a time for memorizing, it's not a strategy, all right? So when I memorize in real time and I turn a page into a memory palace using the 00 to 95, this is page 75, John Cale, boom, and now I'm going to divide it in a particular way to turn it into a memory palace. That's casual. It's not really a strategy. Yes, it has some strategy to it, but it's not a strategy in the way that we're talking about. So the big long-term learning project has a dogmatic, so to speak, rules to follow, and these rules will set you free. We're talking about them today. So put them into action. And you also need to schedule self-testing, right? So there's different ways to think about self-testing. You can set a time where you're going to look through your notes, ask questions about your notes. You can set a time where you're going to write a summary of what it is that you're doing. I, for example, have already written a summary of it's not even chapter 1, it's the opening. And that summary is going to be shot and filmed for you all, and I hope that we see enough engagement on it to warrant doing part 2, and we'll see. But the whole thing is I scheduled the time to do it. Now it's all written, and then I got to do the time for chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, and it's kind of a self-testing, right? What do I understand here? Do I really understand it? Do I need to go and look at another book? Do I need to delay the production of part 2 to go and look at another book? And it turns out that, yes, I do. So I had to go get another book, which is a book on Robert Flood, and this is not a book on Robert Flood, sorry. This is a book of his collected writings. It's extracts and so forth. But I can't really finish what it was that I was doing until that I do this, right? So I had to schedule it. But because I scheduled the self-testing, I'm able to identify these weak links and then go and fix it. By the way, this is incredible. Get it. But don't treat it as a shiny object. Get it if memory is your serious jam, if that's what you're devoting your long-term project to. Because otherwise, you might be thinking, hey, he said it was great, and I don't get it. Well, you might not get it. I mean, I would definitely read this first to make sure that this is your jam. And maybe read this first to make sure that, you're into that sort of stuff. And if you're really into it, read this, because this is amazing. I don't think I would find it amazing or satisfying or useful if I wasn't in this project. Otherwise, I'd just be like, yeah, what the heck are you talking about, buddy? I wouldn't have the field of understanding. I wouldn't be able to make the connections. It would just be like falling through the cracks and just be, yeah, okay, whatever. But when you know, then you know. And so this is one of the problems of the world of knowledge and so forth, is that you have to have you have to have some competence in things in order for them to fit, to make sense. What's that Tool song? I know the pieces fit, etc. Well, you know that if you know it. All right. So, ask, what do you really want out of your life? Then make it happen. Schedule self-testing. Test that you really want that. And, schedule some journaling. Use the Fineman technique. You never have to get stuck. If you are consistent, you never have to get stuck. Fineman Technique 101. Just simply say, well, what is it that I'm confused about? I am confused about why that Francis Yates attributes so much value to Robert Flood, but I can't figure out what the heck she's talking about. How would I solve this? Read some stuff by Robert Flood. Okay, how would I get some stuff? Oh, go to a bookstore. Hey, do you have any stuff on Robert Flood? Oh, yes, you do. Oh, great. Could I acquire that from you? Oh, yes. Do you prefer cash or credit? It's just so simple, right? But if you don't do that kind of thinking in your mind procedurally, then you wind up so lost in the world. You never figure out the solutions. And then if I get to a thing and I go, oh, what the heck does he mean by humors here? Then I might do the Fineman technique sort of thing. Okay, so I don't really understand humors in this context. How would I figure that out? Oh, well, I might look at a dictionary from that period of time and see, and the next thing you know, you've all figured all this out, and your brain is just humming. It's on fire with knowledge because you're just asking yourself questions, and then you're asking, if I knew this stuff, how would I have come to know it? And then you reverse engineer sort of what the person of knowledge does, and then you do those things. Then if you still don't get it, and this is Fineman Technique 101, you go to the teacher and you say, here are all the ways that I tried to solve this problem myself. I'm still not clear about this. And you have a good 250 to 500 words expressing all that you've done and understood it. By the time that you've finished writing that 250 to 500 words, you probably will have figured out the solution on your own. And then you don't have to bother that person. Instead, you send them the book that you wrote on the topic and said, hey, would you maybe give me a quote on this? For a blurb or whatever. And this is how things proceed. Much, much better. Adolfo says, just order both of Yates' books on Amazon. Everything that you've recommended I've purchased has always paid off greatly. Thank you, Mechanic. Okay. Well, great, Adolfo. That's wonderful. So, I think you're in for a wild ride. The only thing I would say to you, Adolfo, is that what she's saying about Bruno, there's some good stuff in here. It's very, very evocative, but I don't think that she's exactly accurate. So be cautious there. But it's an amazing book. It's beautifully written. It's so amazing. It's so compelling. It opens so many questions. But when you look at Bruno scholars, they're going to tell you that, no. She's missing something here. She's attributed Bruno with something that is not particularly Brunonian. And I just was kind of wondering this when I read it myself, and then I follow up with due diligence and so forth. Years ago, Scott Gosnell had told me when he was on the Magnetic Mary Method podcast that he thought that Yates was out to lunch on the core ideas about Bruno. But it's really interesting to see what she says and what she comes up with, because it's not a right or wrong. It's Nietzsche 101, right? Beyond good and evil. It's what is she trying to fulfill, and then what does it bring into relief about what Bruno was really saying, and then how does all this map onto? So Chrome Woman Walking, I know we've talked about Gary Weber before and so forth. One of the things you would notice, I think, if you do all the same studies that I've done, is you would realize that Bruno has so much in common with Gary Weber, and the real Hermeticism has so much in common with Advaita Vedanta. The problem is that so many brains are really, really, they're not relaxed enough to accept the implications, because the implications are strenuous on your brain. And this is why in many traditions they talk about the dark night of the soul, because that also happened to me. It kicked me off into a dark night of a soul. And then you gradually, if you continue to study, you repair yourself, you become whole, and you survive. But at the end of the day, most people can't even accept the implications. And this is Barbara Oakley talks about this in Mind Shift, and she gives the research citations on this. There's something in the brain called the insular cortex that is creating a pain response. Now, I haven't done full due diligence to look into all that sort of stuff, but it makes sense. In fact, it's probably the only explanation for why we are not all at the top of our jam, at the top of our game. Because it's just this brain part. Now, I'm going to share a book with you later that explains this. And I haven't read it for many, many years, and I don't recall that he mentions the brain part. But stick around. I'm going to give you a book to read that is going to blow your brains to pieces. It's like mind blown. You're going to go, why did I never think of things this way before? But you'll have to stay with us to the end or watch the replay to to get this book title. But this book was so transformative for me, and it is something that we can do a little bit of positive and acceptable reductio ad absurdum with in order to come to even more profound revelations. All right, so let's get into that in a bit. But the whole idea is if you just use these tools, they'll help you be consistent. They'll help you never get stuck. And I hope that you all are noticing that Chrome Moonwalking and Adolfo Ortigas have ordered these books that I'm recommending right now, and they're using what's called the speed of implementation rule. Speed of implementation rule comes out of a fact that you'll observe in nature, which is that every moment that you don't take action on a recommendation or something that you know you should be doing or just something that you want to do, every moment that you don't, the chances that you never will exponentially increase. Now, this is not a perfect rule that governs and guarantees that you're going to never ever do these things, but it's just a rule, right? It's got few exceptions, and it happens to me all the time. Someone says, "Oh yeah, you should read Sophie's World or whatever." Every minute that goes by that I don't order it and read it, it exponentially increases the fact that I never will. Now, I ended up seeing it in a bookstore and read it. And I was like, yeah. I understand why it's amazing. But at the same time, I'm not into reading narrative versions of philosophy. I just want to read the philosophy. But it looks really cool. But the rule itself governed. I didn't order it right away, and it governs that I never ended up ultimately reading it, and so on. So you'll see this play out in your life. But if you take action now and you follow recommendations, you'll see that your life starts to improve because you're going to fight against this rule. And it doesn't mean that you go following every recommendation under the sun. You kind of, if you've read The Wise Advocate by my friend Josie Thompson and her co-authors Art Kleiner and Jeffrey Schwartz, I guess. I've never heard him be called Jeff, but I just felt like calling him Jeff there. If you read that, there's something in The Wise Advocate that gives you some tools that can help you feel not your gut instinct, but something higher and more profound. And there's good science there for you on how to get more guidance from yourself with 2 simple rules. But I'll leave it to you to read that book. Love that book. And Josie and Jeffrey were on the Magnetic Brain Method podcast if you want to check out that episode. Anyway, organization and scheduling, they go together. They're very, very powerful. And you want to take this exercise, which some of you already have. Organize a reading list and then schedule your reading, your reflecting, and your self-testing. This is very, very important. If you do this, if you turn this into a practice, you will find that you are going to have such amazing memory when you're older. And you do this progressively and persistently. And it doesn't matter where you are right now. You could say, "Oh, but it's too late for me." Wrong answer. Now is the time to get started. No matter where you are, no matter what condition you have, get started now. Start to read properly. Start to schedule time properly. Proper means practicing this, not perfectionist, just progressing towards getting better and better and better and better at it. Every minute that passes, you are leaving so much of life's beautiful riches behind. So many riches. And that's sad. But now is the time. Now is the chance. Ask yourself, what do you really want out of life? Keep asking that. Practice the practice of what you really want out of life. And you'll be so amazed by how many incredible things start to happen when you follow these principles that we talk about all the time. It's just science. There's nothing controversial about this. You don't have to believe, because belief is the enemy. Why is belief the enemy? Because it's a bunch of thoughts that don't have anything that maps onto reality. If it's true, you don't have to believe it. That's just a simple fact. If it's true, you simply do not have to believe it. And so, how do you know it's true? You test. You live scientifically. Test, test, test again, and then never delude yourself. You will delude yourself, but learn the tools to limit self-delusion. You Are Not So Smart. Read that book. It'll help you in that regard. All right. Number 5, memory strategy. Make relationships. Yes to other people. Like we're doing now. We're friends, right? Get subscribed if you aren't already, so we can be. Share this stuff around. That's a friendly thing to do, right? That's relationships. Well, this is not exactly what I mean by making relationships today, but that is part of it. Make relationships. But also make relationships to existing memories, right? So when you hear things, just as a strategy, what existing memory comes up? You might say, well, nothing comes up. And that might happen. But then just ask yourself, well, if I could remember something, what would come up, right? So, if I think of Francis Yates, what comes up? First memory is the first time that I read it. Reading Moonwalking with Einstein comes up as a memory. What else comes up as a memory? Oh, the magic shop in Toronto, where I think I saw Jay Sankey one time, right? Like, this is just random sort of stuff, but it's the practice of linking things to existing memories. It's not randomness that's at stake here. It's the practice of just being able to come up with existing memories on demand and make relationships, even if they're very loose. It's the practice of fluid memory, free association. Very, very important. And the more you can do that while you're reading, while you're learning, the more you're going to remember. The stronger your memory will be. You're flexing that muscle. It's very, very important and powerful. Also, make analogies. Even if they're incorrect, make analogies. So you may have seen on the community tab yesterday, I made an analogy to Han Solo and to Star Wars and all that sort of stuff. It's a bad analogy. I even wrote in there, this is a pretty weak analogy. But I was making an analogy because I practice making analogies. It's important because it's a way of making mental relationships. This, that, weighing things around. It also helps you do something else, which is a mental tool of contrasting. Compare and contrast. I'm not sure what's better or worse, but it's both, right? But contrasts are often more useful in terms of memory for me because existing memories and analogies are already comparisons already, but they're not necessarily contrastative. So we want to make contrasts. I lean on making contrasts much more heavily because I think comparisons is already all factored into this. But there may be more work to be done there in terms of more consciously making comparisons. But that's essentially what an analogy is anyway. Semantics. All right, so factuality is another one. And so if you missed it on the channel, there is Study and Remember Part 2 called Fact Power, and it'll teach you more about factuality. In brief, it's just like understanding what facts really are, not what you want them to be, not what they taught you in school, but the real truth about what facts are, which are heavily contingent and testable, and you need to rock and roll on that higher basis as opposed to getting stuck in the weeds and the gears of the way people normally think of facts, which leads to all kinds of nonsense on the internet, in journalism and all that sort of stuff, where, oh man, they're going to destroy us with their understanding of facts. And, if they do, so it goes. All right. Now, as an exercise, try to think what is analogous to a memory strategy. Make an analogy of memory strategy as an exercise for today's purposes. And then think about what's the contrast. What is a contrast to a memory strategy? Try and get 5 going if you can. And then what is the factuality of memory strategies? There's a nice little internally related exercise for you. Take it or leave it. I think it's a powerful one. All right, our next memory strategy is, of course, the wonderful, the unparalleled, the extraordinary mind map tactic. And so if you haven't gone through the mind map examples playlist, check that out. in the linked repository below this video. You have access to all of that, and you'll learn a great deal. Mind mapping is about thinking. It's about remembering. It also lets you make analogies. It also lets you stress test factuality. It also allows you to do contrasting and comparison. But I think of it as productive and also something that allows for memorization. It enables you to break things down. It enables you to do chunking in a certain way, right? But you don't have to be beholden to all those things. Everything comes down to what is your strategy. So when you have your long-term learning goal, and then you think of your strategies within it, mind mapping will have a place, and then how specifically you use mind mapping will also have its place, and consider that. And then there's different styles. So Keko did this one, and she sort of heard what I was saying about seashelling in memory palaces, and then she applied that to note-taking or mind mapping. And so this is beautiful. This is like the magnetic memory method in a nutshell, in the form of a seashell. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Mind mapping can also be useful for spaced repetition. So let's say you've mind mapped something that you want to memorize. Then you have this beautiful, wonderful display that you can visit and revisit a number of times and actually keep track of how many times that you revisit it. And this is from Phil Chambers. You know, he has the idea that what you can do, and this is a beautiful, beautiful thing, is to keep track of how many times that you've reviewed a mind map. You just use Roman numerals on the bottom left or right corner, or wherever you want. But, you know, just to keep it neat and tidy, you could always pick a rule, stick with it, and then use Roman numerals to just check off how many times you reviewed it. And, you know, go for 10, go for 11 reviews or whatever. And this will do a great deal for you. This is a creative use of spaced repetition. It's not mnemonics. It's not a memory technique in the sense of memory palaces and so forth. But it is a great way of using mind mapping for spaced repetition. Now, you can oversaturate yourself, of course, and that would not be a positive outcome. But if you use it strategically, then it's going to be laser focused and produce higher results. You can, of course, use mind maps as a memory palace, and in the linked repository, follow up on the mind mapping videos, because part 3 of that series shows you how, with a very dedicated example. Now, for an exercise, pick your lifelong learning project and use at least 3 styles of mind mapping. So if you don't know the different styles of mind mapping, I couldn't recommend a bigger and better Bible than Mind Map Mastery by Tony Buzan. This is a beautiful book, and everybody should have it on their shelf in print, please, so that you can follow up. And it does have things to follow up on. A beautiful resources section, and I was delighted to have known or gone through many of these in advance. So one of the things you'll find if you've practiced the practice as I'm teaching it with 80-20 distribution and all that sort of stuff, is you'll begin to see how actually less is more, because you'll go, oh yeah, I remember that, or oh, I've seen that before, and now you're more prompted to go and get it, and then you use speed of implementation. Bam! Amazing how things can compound very, very quickly. There may be many books out there, but not nearly as many as it seems. All right, now strategy number 7. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and say hello. I'm going to grab myself a drink. I'm going to refill my water here, and we will talk about the power of reading aloud, because it's quite nuanced in its way, as it always is. And I like to read aloud in many, many different ways. So in grad school, for example, I was deeply depressed, and unfortunately I couldn't read at all, and I allowed myself for far too long to not do any reading, just sitting around, sulking, drinking beer, and doing self-medicating experiments that were very dumb. But things got together, and you probably heard the story before, but I found memory techniques, and I started to turn things around and innovated and came up with different things. Read The Art of Memory, and all kinds of beautiful things started to happen for me as a result. And one of the things that happened is I still couldn't read or concentrate very well, so I started to read out loud. And I started to record my own audiobooks. Now, back in that day, this was on these little recorders with these tiny little cassettes, and I tried to listen back to myself in 2 times speed, but then I'd be like, a really fast Minnie Mouse kind of voice. But in any case, it worked. It worked because I was able. It wasn't really the listening back that was so powerful. It was actually focus and concentration. And then I'd just remember more. I'd remember more because the levels of processing effect guarantees that you multi-channel things, speaking being one thing, reading is one thing, but speaking is another one, and just started to remember more. Started to get the grain of the text, as Roland Barthes called it, through the system. And even remembering that title, I think that's what it's called, Grain of the Text, Roland Barthes. It's partly there just because of having read from it and spoken from it and heard that beautiful sound, grain of the text, and that name, Roland Barthes, right? It's just very nice how it works. So, you don't have to sit there and try to focus. You can create focus. You can mechanically turn focus into a physical activity by reading aloud. And sometimes you'll find, and I still find, even today, I'm like, huh? And I just go, okay, now this manuscript also shows plans of memory rooms marked with 5 places, 4 in the corner. And then I go, oh, yeah, now I get it. Because of just taking a moment to verbalize it. Then, of course, you've got other strategies like this. So one of the things that you can do is rhyme for memory. So if you had to remember something, just looking in our chat here, like Russell Bowers from Alaska, Russell Towers in Kalaska, or, like it's just something like this. Try to figure out a rhyme. And then that can already help remember more. And then you think. Rhyming is also a great trigger for coming up with images, because Bowers, towers, then I think of Faulty Towers. I think of the No Means No song called The Tower, and the rhyme, Bower is not necessarily something that is immediately an image, right? If you look into it, you have a bow there. And so you could see someone named Russell bowing or tying a bow. Like those sorts of images are already there. But if you don't immediately think of that, by rhyming it with tower, all of a sudden a whole bunch of images come, because now you can have someone tying a bow around a tower. So it could be John Cleese. He was in Faulty Towers, wasn't he? I think so. Been a long time. But in any case, I could also think of the No Means No song, The Tower. This may mean nothing to you. By the way, one of the reasons I think that Frances Yates wrote the way that she did is she didn't use the techniques, so she didn't really realize just how extreme mnemonic examples alienate people and fail to connect them, because you're just like, No Means No, huh? Faulty Towers, what? John Cleese? And then I'll tell you, oh yeah, and by the way, there's a guy in No Means No named Mr. Wrong who used to dress in a certain way, blah, blah, and they used blah, 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 and the next thing you know, it's just like, it's a mess, but it all makes sense to the individual practitioner, and that's all that matters. So there really are no mnemonic examples. All right, but you can also just use that. I hope that helps you. Think that through, how powerful that is. Just stop, rhyme things, and then project into them, or project, there's maybe a better word here, extract or launch yourself out of this to other levels of association. Then there's singing for memory and brain health, which is very, very powerful. We talked about that on a previous live stream about how to memorize songs, so you can check that out if you like. Also, discussion groups, great way to remember more, because you're going to hear yourself speak, you're going to hear others speak, and then you can repeat directions and instructions and content in your own words. So let's say you're with a study group and you're going through a skill or whatever. Someone says, well, first what you need to do is open this file in the library and then extract the microfiche, put it into the machine or whatever. You can just repeat it, and then follow up in writing. Write down those instructions. It's one of the most amazing things. It's documentation. There's so many things that you learn how to do once. You think you're going to remember it. Then 2 months later, you have to go do it. And you're like, oh, how do I do this? And you miss all these steps and you make a mess. But if you just repeat it verbally and then write it down and keep records, Google Drive is like an amazing gift to humanity for having all this stuff searchable, these documentation things written down. You're going to remember it better, but if you don't, you have at least a chance of finding your way back to it. And then in terms of focus and concentration, one of the things, I've got a very busy mind sometimes. I've gotten a lot better and now have periods of complete silence that I never thought was possible. But still, when the mind is busy, and it does happen from time to time, just mentally repeat what people say, listening, and just saying the words to focus in, to not be wandering around, to not have this mind all over the place. And then when you do want to memorize something, you can launch from there into the mnemonic strategies that we talk about a lot. So as an exercise for our 7th principle here, pick a page from a book, from your lifelong project, as we've been talking about today, and narrate it. Just read it. See how that feels. Record yourself if you like, and listen back to it. Very, very powerful. Now, the 8th strategy that I have for you, you guys still awake? Are we still connected? I don't know. I haven't seen any chats from you at all. Let me know. Should I abandon ship here, or are we still alive and kicking? I'll carry on. Priming. So I'm not talking really about speed reading technique, but I've referred to it already several times today. But there's other kinds of priming, right? So in the priming world, speed reading is essentially bibliography, like we've talked about many times before. But it's also observing mental responses to difficulty and to strategizing, right? So what do I mean here? Oh, Shane is still here in the house. DA Lit is still here. Thank you for letting me know. By the way, everybody, this is your opportunity to ask questions, get them answered. This is a public service, and it's extraordinary that we have this technology that allows us to do this. So, any questions? The classroom effect. Hey, are there any questions? And everybody's got a question, but nobody raises their hand. This is not the time to do that. Go ahead. Go nuts. Adolfo's still here. Excellent. Good to know that you are alive and kicking. All right. So what do I mean by observing mental responses to difficulty and strategizing? This is a way of self-priming. So instead of, oh, this is difficult, oh, poor me, you could say, this is difficult. Yeah. Right? Now, in sports, right, there are some interesting studies that I've read, because I've always wondered, I have these friends who are super successful, and they're always saying, oh, this is gonna hurt. This is gonna be such a big job. Oh, I don't know if I could do it. Oh, and I'm just like, you've done this so many times before. What the heck are you talking about? And I never understood. I never criticized them or anything like that. I'm totally the opposite. I don't say any of this stuff to myself. It makes me so depressed if I do that. Even if I'm thinking it, I just blow it out, right? Use other mental tools. But I just came across some research at some point. There's actually a strategy in coaching where the coaches actually figure out the motivational type of the individual. And some people really do need that. They need to be like, oh, this is going to hurt. And then that somehow bracing for it improves their performance. So it's definitely something to look more into. The point being is you got to figure that out for yourself, because I'm not like that at all. When I used to go to the gym and my coach, I still go to the gym, but I don't have a PT at the moment. Probably should have. I probably hurt myself in my shoulder there by not having one. But in any case, he used to say all that stuff, and I just, please don't say that to me. I don't want to think that. Just let's put on the Nevermore and and just get it done. And so that's what we did instead. But in any case, you might respond to it. So think that through. The point is to observe your own mental responses to difficulty and then strategize so that the wind is in your favor, so that you get that extra push. And I just happen to be fighter pilot attitude. Come on, let's go. This is war. We're going to win, right? Like that sort of thing is my favorite thing. And there's science behind this, by the way. So, don't think that this is just some la-di-da woo-woo thing that I think works. We see this in the research that one way or the other, a mental model is very, very powerful. So I'm more of like the military brute force learning. Like maybe I just played G.I. Joe too much and watched G.I. Joe too much. I don't know, as a kid. But that's the whole point, right? Is a lot of these things are formative in childhood, and a lot of it is positive. A lot of it can be tapped into. A lot of it can be massaged to be more and better. And the world might criticize that from time to time, but fighter pilot attitude, that's just the way that it worked out, and it works. And I have stress tested it, and I've tried the other things, and I just wince when I see my very successful friends saying, "Oh, this is gonna hurt," and but I understand it, and it seems to work for them, even if it doesn't work for me. But in terms of that research, if you read Indistractable by Nir Eyal, He talks about it. He lays it out why that it works. It's chosen mental models. It's explicitly and expressly time laid aside to figure out your mental models and create some secular rituals around it. That's his term, secular rituals. And the whole point is you don't have to believe in it. It's not about, oh, I believe that I'm a fighter pilot with an attitude. No. It's do you set aside the rituals that match the metaphor, right? So I've been years before Nir Eyal's book Indistractable came out. You may have been on a live stream or a webinar where I do the memory exercise. Give yourself a memory metaphor. This is just known. Metaphors are interesting. So from Nietzsche to Nir Eyal, this is clear, and even before that, right? It's very, very important. The thing is it true? Is it a good metaphor that you've created for yourself? And I have created in my time for myself some very bad metaphors that didn't serve, they didn't work. I'm not going to beat myself up about it, but I kept persisting and I kept changing and testing. And there will be more to come, because that's the whole point, right? Is even as good as they get, they could tire out, they could wear out, you will change. So you've got to, sort of figure them out. You've got to test, you've got to change, and maybe sometimes you don't have to change. Maybe some will stand the test of time. I like the mental model of magnetic, for reasons you probably heard me talk about before, but I often use Morpheus when it's useful, or sometimes I might use Neo, but I'm much more into the Morpheus thing. And then there are secular rituals, so to speak, to use Nir's term, that really, really need to be in place. They need to work in tandem and really milk the value out of that. Anyway, Nietzsche, by the way, had said that you will always be forced by the way that human psychology works to have mythologies. That's the way he put it. He didn't use the word metaphors. And he says, this is in Birth of Tragedy, you need to participate in the selection of those mythologies, or all hell is going to break loose. And he indicted German culture for not picking an integrative model. So he talked about the Apollonian versus the Dionysian. Anyway, we're not going to get into a long speech about Nietzsche as much as I would like to. But you need to understand that this is what Freud found in Nietzsche. And he said, I hope nobody finds out that all my work is basically just repeating Nietzsche. It wasn't, but he was very, very aware of his debt to Nietzsche, and so much of how psychoanalysis was developed and all the good parts of psychoanalysis are really hinged on this, and all the bad stuff is maybe also hinged on it. I don't know. I'm not a specialist in the history of psychoanalysis, but I've read a lot about it and been through it myself. And it's just an amazing, amazing thing. And it's important to understand that a lot of it works when it works, because it's helping you detoxify all the mythologies that you were forced to adopt by the nature of having a human brain. And it helps you adopt better ones. Frame effect. There's all kinds of words and stuff. So it's in the science. It's in the best of the best science. Very recently, Nir Eyal in Indistractable mentions it. Choose mental models and then build the secular rituals that they can fuel and that fuel them, and be prepared to change, explore, and so forth, right? And so that's something you might do. Now, what is a secular ritual that you might do? Very simple. Memorize cards. So playing cards is a very beautiful secular ritual. Yeah, you could say, well, there's some sort of religious background behind all of this and yada, 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 and you wouldn't be incorrect. But at the end of the day, you can also get cards that are not from this tradition. In the Arabic world, they have their own sort of cards or whatever. But the whole point is if you think of yourself as a lifelong learner, one thing that you can do is just a quick creative burst of exercise. I like to memorize just 13 cards or thereabout. It doesn't have to be 13 cards, just however many I feel like. In creativity studies, there's something called priming, and a priming creative exercise is before you get into the big task, the one that is, it's going to burn, before you get into the task where I've got a fighter pilot attitude, whatever it is, you do a quick, small, short, creative burst of exercise to warm up your muscles. So when you're going to memorize something for your school test, or you're going to memorize something for a language or whatever, before you dive into the big, nasty, challenging goal, just a quick little exercise to warm things up. Ooh, that's some beautiful stuff that's going to happen for you there. And if you saw the note-taking video, we injected Adolfo doing exactly this, priming, right? So sitting there, learning session. Anyway, Link in the depository below. Do not miss the note-taking video, please, so that you have the benefit of all this. And then, of course, what is the natural thing to do after you've warmed up? After you've been, oh, it's going to burn, or fighter pilot attitude, military, blah, blah, blah. What are you going to do? Cool down, my friends. Cool down. Relax. What? Well, why not another couple of cards or some doodling or something to just beautiful, beautiful. Before these live streams, I do these little things. So we'll do a video about that sometime, what I do. It's what I did before the TEDx. I remember so many people saying, are you nervous? You don't look nervous. Why don't you look nervous? Like other people are like, before they go on the TED Talk. My wife is like, aren't you nervous? About what? No, of course not. But that's because I have a strategy, right? And if you have strategy, lovely life, lovely life, lovely life. Now, another way to prime yourself is to have a coach or a consultant, whatever you want to call it. And people who come to me, they usually come again if they need it. But the reality is that a lot of people just won't invest in themselves when they need coaching. Not everybody does. But if you need some coaching, get it. Because that person, if they're worth their salt, they're going to help you figure this stuff out, right? And it depends on what you need, and you got to figure that out. You might have to hire a couple, but you can really, really accelerate, ignite your progress if you are forward thinking enough to invest in harnessing the help of an individual who has what you want, right? You could try to reverse engineer it from watching hours of their videos and so forth, and that will work for some people. But some people that never will, they need that touch. There's lots of things, frame effect and all kinds of words that we can throw out there about why that it all works. Is it going to work for you or not? Well, it depends on your persistence in finding the right fit and then actually doing what you're told, or at least doing 20% of what's told. Speed of implementation principle will apply, etc., etc., etc. But, those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, they'll figure it out, and they'll make sure that it's part of their program. And so here's a little exercise for you. We'll get into some of those wonderful questions you've been pumping in, but pick a mental model. Pick a mental model and then build a secular ritual. And learn how to prime yourself. Learn how to be primed. Very, very important and powerful. All right, so let's see here. Shane says, do you think that using flashcards is still useful, or do you have tips to mix memory methods with flashcards? Shane, that's a great question. And yes, this is what we cover. So my number one tip is always this. Get the foundational training. Then you don't need tips. Tips are the poison until that you have the foundations. Because if you're just trying to put together all the tips, then, the tips just, they fall. But when you have the foundations, then you're in tip heaven right now, right? But the value of tip heaven and all the rain and the manna falling down right now is relative to the preparation of the student. So my number one tip is to make sure that you've gone through the master plan in the masterclass as a bare minimum, so that you understand you understand the power of the question that you're asking, and that you actually see that it is about mixing memory methods and the fun that will come for you after that. So that's the answer to that. Ahmed is in the house. Good to see you, Ahmed. Hello, hello. AG says, hello, doctor. I wanted to ask you a question about extraction of knowledge. I have no problem creating memory palaces and memorizing. However, in conversations, I seem to get tongue-tied and forget. So tongue-tiedness and forgetting. I'd need to know more about exactly what it is that you are having conversations about and how tongue-tyingness expresses itself. Is it presque-vous that you have? Is it ugly sister effect that you have? I don't know, so I could only just, answer very, very generally. But you're asking about extracting knowledge from your head, and the most direct general answer is, if you're having that issue, then something's wrong with your process. You're not making memory palaces that are robust enough. Your magnetic imagery isn't robust enough. Your recall rehearsal is falling apart at some level. Or is there something else going on? Diet, sleep, all these sorts of things. But you also might not be practicing speaking and eloquence. You might not have read, for example, Rhetorica ad Herennium, or some more modern book about how to express yourself, and you might not be practicing it. Because take, for example, if you go back and watch my first live streams, speaking live, and I'm not saying I'm good now, but I'm a lot better than I used to be. man, was I really bad at it. Like I was painfully bad. But the more that I spoke in this weird world where it's like, okay, so this little thing tells me there's some people here, but for all intents and purposes, I'm talking to myself, right? No, I'm not talking to myself because you're here, but there's still like this training effect where you have to get used to the fact that for all intents and purposes, I am looking at this dashboard, a series of dashboards actually. It's extraordinarily complex. And you have to practice the practice of being able to get better at it and get better and better and better. And one of the things you may have noticed that I started practicing only very recently is starting the live streams with a story. And it's not natural to me to tell stories, but I have to start practicing it, right? It is natural for me to write stories, but it's not natural for me to tell stories verbally. So I'm still pretty rusty at it, and I'm still pretty bad, and I don't put enough thought into it and so forth, and I don't memorize the stories. So maybe that's, where I need to go, and maybe that's where I will go. But I am a little bit tongue-tied to it and extracted and so forth. But when I went and gave the TEDx, you'd better believe that I was ready to tell the story, and it was structured, and it had, little moments that needed to fire off. And if you know anything about narratology, you'll be like, oh man, that's, architectonic tautology going on there. He's trying to be too clever. Whatever, you might have some criticisms of it from a narratological level. But I put a lot of thought into what I was saying, when I was saying it, and I made sure that I memorized it so that I said it at that exact moment so that this piston gets set, or not this piston, this pistol gets set up on the wall in Act 1 so that it fires in Act 3 and all that sort of stuff. Overthinking it maybe, but I don't know. I used to be a story consultant, so I better tell a damn good story. And that's that. But in terms of starting the live streams, I really need to practice it a lot more, and I have been practicing it, and I told a story today, and it was crap. I'm ready to own that. But I just had to get rolling because I told Adolfo it was going to start in an hour, and I wanted to be timely. that must be coming from all the years I lived in Germany. Zack, zack, zack. Punkt genau. Auf die Plätze fertig los. All right. Bleaksan is in the house. Just got your course. So far, so good. Thanks. Excellent, Bleaksan. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. This is like office hours, so please let forth with questions that you may have, and I appreciate you being here. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Let's carry on with strategy number 9, memory strategy number 9. Seek novel experiences. Why, dear friends, do this? Well, this needs some more research. It always does. That's the nature of research, right? That's the nature of science. But the thing to understand about norepinephrine is that it is related to stress, but when we're in new situations, this apparently creates more norepinephrine, which is also related to memory. So I've often, and I came into researching it in the first place, because I often wondered in my Memory Palace work, why is it that I remember airports so well and the drive into cities? I have these profoundly rich memories of every place that I've gone, the arrival. And so I was looking through some brain chemistry of this and novelty, and it came up. And so then it was like, well, it's probably norepinephrine. So I've always thought about that. And then I started to experiment with this by studying in multiple locations, doing memory practice in multiple locations, and wondering if this can happen. And it does seem to have an effect. Now, it could be that I'm, putting expectation effect into things. But it actually makes sense, I think, from a neurochemical basis. I'm going to speak to a neuroscientist who is a memory competitor named Boris Conrad on the podcast, and I'm interviewing him tomorrow. So I'm excited to stress test some of these ideas that I've come up with in my research and see how they go. But it's also related, I believe, to something called interleaving. So interleaving is, spending some time, it's a learning strategy, a memory strategy. You spend some time on the art of memory or learning some stuff, and then you radically switch, boom, to a completely different task, right? And then you do some stuff on there, and then boom, you switch to another thing. And this is novelty, right? So imagine you do this with a little bit of strategy that you do it in multiple locations, and you think about how we have that archetype of the really smart librarian who knows the whole library and can speak very specifically about this, and then cognitive shift over to that. Maybe a jack of all trades and master of none, but nonetheless, they've got this kind of sorted, and they are a master of the library, right? So they're a master of information. So that can come from interleaving. So look into interleaving. Find out what it is you can do, how you can do it to maybe tap into this. Now, there's a catch though. There usually is, right? You want to avoid the Zeigarnik effect. So what is the Zeigarnik effect? Well, if you're seeking novel experiences, right, then you might give yourself a to-do list that is so overwhelming that it degrades your concentration. So Zeigarnik effect, one of the things it says, it's got more nuance than we're going to get into today, but one of the things it says is that the more undone things you have on a list, the more they're going to interrupt your focus, right? And so this is why to-do list management and being cautious about what you put on your to-do list is a very, very powerful thing to do, because it creates what I believe they used to call in older times guilt. The sense of guilt, the bucket list of, oh, I wish that I would have, and oh, it keeps coming to my mind that I want this, but I don't have it, and oh, da 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 da. Well, you don't want that, so be careful around this. But as a simple exercise that can benefit anybody and isn't going to create a great deal of debt that leads to the Zeigarnik effect and all the guilt that comes from it, just pick 3 locations you could study in, progressively plan and schedule how you're going to go and get there, and do it. So, I often do this. It's a bit of a pain in the butt, I'll admit, because you get used to things. It's that effect in a classroom where you like to sit in the same seat all the time. You don't want to be told, oh no, everybody has to sit somewhere else. No, you don't want that. Primacy effect explains part of that reason. But I purposely go out of my way to not go to the same cafes all the time and then go to new ones. We just went to a new one over the weekend. It's a pain in the butt to find a new one, figure out, is it open at this time? And then, where is it? And da-da-da-da, and then walk there and figure it all out. But it's so powerful for the brain, because now I have new memory palaces. I have the effect itself of a new experience. Then you have these different kinds of people there, and you're like, oh, that's interesting how that they are that way there, and da-da-da-da. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful. And creates positive stress that leads to new memory formation. This leads to lifelong robustness of your neural networks in your brain. That is a powerful memory strategy for getting more out of life. So we're going to talk about mnemonics, I promise. And I'm going to share with you that book that I promised is going to blow your minds. And you're going to want to read it. But first, we got to talk about lifestyle as a memory strategy and catch up with AG's thing here. But this we can go through quite quickly, but it's important. It's important. Lifestyle, sleep, exercise, diet, stress management, memory-based meditation, very, 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 very important. If you're not sleeping properly, if you're not always working on optimizing, maximizing your sleep, you're missing out, because it's so good what happens to you when you optimize it. Yeah, you have to spend some time on it. Oh, poor me. But you're going to get so much out of it. You're going to wonder, why didn't I take care of this earlier? That explosive, blissful feeling that comes from being well rested, reliably, predictably. Ooh-wee, that's some sweet stuff. Same thing with exercise. Even though I totally blew my shoulder, even though I got some hip issues that are coming now, oh my God, I could get lost in the weeds of imagining just what a crippled old man I might become. I'm still going to the gym, going to doctors, figuring it out, what's going on, trying different things, working on it, because exercise is essential. I really have seen both sides of the coin. I think it was Socrates who said that everybody owes it to themselves to be at the height of their athleticism at least once in life. You owe it to yourself to try to hold on to it too once you got it, because it can fall apart pretty fast. And I'm feeling the fall apart effect, but I still go to the gym and I do what I can do. I got a picture for you guys at some point that I got to share that I took the other day where I'm so stubborn about making it happen that I'm doing deadlifts with a wooden stick just to go through the motions and imagining the day when I get back to shape, when I can deadlift properly again without agitating this shoulder and sending my back and neck and all this stuff into worlds of hell, because the hell isn't fun, right? So, moderation, etc., but don't give up on the vision. Take care of yourself. Diet, same thing. I got to do a whole dietary review again, but it's just the way that it is. Stress management, I got to manage stress all the time. Believe me, the things that have happened in the last 48 hours, they're enough to manage it, right? And meditation is the key. It surely is. Beautiful stuff. Now, other life management stuff that you don't normally talk about that are very, very good for your memory, because they take things off your mind, in a way that you don't know that they'll take things off your mind until that you've done it, are things like having an emergency meeting point. So, knowing if all hell breaks loose, where you're going to meet your family and settling on it, right? Some people think we're crazy, but over here in the Magnetic Mary Method headquarters, we have fire blankets under our bed, because hopefully they are never needed under any circumstances. But I never have to worry about, oh man, I should get fire blankets for us because I got it done, right? And by the way, fire blankets can be used as memory palaces. Topic for another day. And then, things like water. Enough water for 2 weeks. Store some food for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. A general canteen. Man, you want to be miserable? Live without toilet paper. Make sure you have stocks of these things. Not excessive, not crazy, but enough. And, we're living in a world where this is sadly more realistic than it seems. And sadly, we're living in a world where people delayed sharing these messages and saying, oh, you're just a prepper and a paranoid person, blah, blah, blah. Oh, the ignorance. It's just so good for your memory to not have the guilty, Zeigarnik effect, worries about, yes, I know that I should do those things, but I'm not doing them. And so it comes up again and again in your mind. But just some simple lifestyle things. Have an emergency meeting point. Have a will. Get it together as much as you can. And then you don't have to have them on your mind anymore. And then when they do come to your mind, guess what? They come to your mind with deep satisfaction that you're on top of things. All right? So that's lifestyle stuff. And, mindfulness and meditation are very, very important. They're very good strategies, but you also got to be prepared for the dark side of mindfulness. And Doty talks about them in this wonderful book, Into the Magic Shop. And if you haven't read Into the Magic Shop, please do. Not just because of this one little point. This is not the book that I said that I would mention later, by the way. That's still coming. But he talks about the dark side of meditation and mindfulness. And one of the things that can happen is, you get sort of distanced a little bit. You get discernment, but also you get detachment. And you're not so concerned about things. You're able to let go of outcomes. And so as he talks about it here, he talks about like the Wall Street guys. Wall Street guys and other corporate guys are sort of doing this, and that has a potential negative effect because they're detached from things, and it's just they see the world the way it really is, or at least with fewer distorting filters. And so we know in the spiritual world, like all these gurus get enlightened, and then they, end up exploiting all their followers and doing all kinds of horrid things. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not enlightened. It may be precisely because they are enlightened and they see what's really going on, that naked lunch, what's really on the end of the fork that we saw before, and they exploit it. So, keep these things in mind. Make sure you have a good moral compass. So make meditation part of your lifestyle, but always work on your moral compass. Because when you see the world for what it really is, and you survive the dark night of the soul, then, you're going to need that moral compass more than ever before. All right? So here's an exercise for you. Audit every category that we've talked about in lifestyle: sleep, diet, exercise, etc., and plan to improve. Schedule your plan to improve. Do the research using all the tools that we've talked about that help you do research better as part of your lifelong learning project. Include yourself. And never forget, this is part of your health for all things, body and mind. And even though it's a bit of a mistake, more than a bit of a mistake, some of the things here are very productive in terms of reminding you that you can use these memory techniques to improve your body and your soul. And remind yourself, too, that all those people who poo-poo self-help don't know a whole lot about philosophy because that's what it always was. All right? Now, we're going to talk about memory techniques, but let me catch up with the chat. I got one amazing book recommendation for you that you're not going to want to miss. And then we'll go with the 11th and final technique, the kingpin of them all, memory techniques. Ooh, sweet stuff. AG says, I think that it's what's knowing how to speak and communicate my ideas. What books do I recommend? knowing how to speak and communicating your ideas. So are we talking about speaking in public as a speaker, or are we talking about in communication, in conversation? I need to have some more details on that from you. Thank you for providing them, AG. Adolfo says, Barbara Oakley goes on into interleaving. I've used this technique and I've experienced better recall on the subjects that I'm learning. Oh, that's great, Adolfo. Yeah, I mean, don't miss out on the Barb. Very, very good stuff. Niori is in the house. Good to see you, Niori. Wonderful. Says, I just want to say that I'm enjoying your course. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Niori. I appreciate you being part of it and your wonderful emails. And please continue taking the course and make it happen. Everybody can do it. It's so powerful what happens when you get into it. And take it again and again and again. Review it. So many people here are in the masterclass. Go for a review. Update it frequently. And there's more updates to come. Mr. Space is in the house. Hello, Mr. Space. Good to see you. It's been a while. Wonderful to have you here. Wonderful to have you here. All right. Okay, so AG says for both. You know, I haven't read a whole lot of books about speaking from stage, and I haven't read a whole lot about having better conversations except for unconscious communication. So read Robert Lang's, Dr. Lang's, if you want, for some of the things that I've read. For speaking, if you go on to magneticmarymethod.com, you can read basically what I have to say about memorizing speeches there. Once I get my TEDx back, I'm going to be updating the masterclass on giving speeches. I'll put some more thought into that, but all those materials, I think you're in the masterclass, so you can already go through the existing course on how to memorize a speech, and then stay tuned for the update. And there is a recent blog post where I go through some of the things, but the real kingpin is going to come after I have the TEDx back, and I will, because it's fresh in my mind, the real deal of like word by word, and then when to deviate from word by word, how to get yourself back on your feet if you surprise yourself by saying something that you weren't planning to say, how to deal with reactions from people, because there were certain reactions that I noted that I had to account for in the thing, like laughing at something that, so for example, I told a joke, but they didn't laugh at it until that the second iteration came, but they didn't laugh at the first one. So I was kind of like, oh, they didn't laugh. So I wasn't prepared for the laughter later because it didn't trigger anything. Anyway, whatever. You've got to like deal with all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I don't know. We'll see what the video looks like. I have no idea what it's going to look like on video, but it had a cool vibe in the room. Anyway, I'm not the best judge of it because I was the guy doing it, but just that's going to be the answer to your question. So if you can be patient and just look up how to give a speech on magneticmarymethod.com, it'll get you started. And then I have to think more about conversation if I have a book to recommend. But really what I have to recommend, oh boy, you know it's coming, is the Magnetic Mary Method Masterclass. So if you haven't gone through it, go through it from beginning to end. Start with the master plan. Make sure you're listening to those MP3s. Take the course on speeches. Learn how to memorize poetry so you start to train yourself, train your mouth to be able to say, you know, things like, tickle us, do we not laugh? Wrong us. Or no, tickle us, do we not laugh? Prick us, do we not bleed? Wrong us, do we not revenge? See, if you trip over yourself, like I just did, ooh, embarrassing, my mouth is dry. Then you go, oh, embarrassing, my mouth is dry, you fix it, and then you start again. Tickle us, do we not laugh? Prick us, do we not bleed? Wrong us, do we not revenge? And you just recover, because that's what you ultimately need to do. You need to not get hung up on what people are thinking and just be yourself and perform. And if your mouth can't work, you've got to sort of be able to practice your mouth. And one of the best ways to do this is memorize poetry, right? Filled with mingled cream and amber, I will raise this glass again. Such hilarious visions clamber through the chambers of my brain. Quaintest thoughts and... Oh, I haven't memorized this for a long time. Quaintest thoughts and queerest fancies come to life and fade away. What care I how time passes? I am drinking beer today. So you see, even I trip up, but I speak a lot better just simply because I have practiced the practice. It's like if you want to see like brutal failure, watch the how to memorize a song thing where I'm trying to play a song and I'm making mistakes and all this sort of stuff. What's the real problem there? Is the real problem because I don't know how to play the guitar? No, it's just that I haven't practiced the practice enough of doing it on live streams. Same thing with tripping up over poetry. I haven't practiced the practice enough of actually reciting poetry from my head. It's been so long since I said, filled with mingled cream and amber, I will raise this glass again. Such hilarious visions clamber through the chambers of my brain. Quaintest thoughts and queerest fantasies come to life and fade away. What care I how time passes? I am drinking ale today. I sometimes change that end line, but now the second time it comes a lot better. It would be a lot better if I recited poetry every day, and it would help. So it might help you to memorize some poetry as just part of getting your mouth moving a little bit more. And then just be yourself. Relax. Be relaxed. Let go of the consequences. So I don't know if that's helpful to you. I hope that it is. But number one thing is think of it through the lens of what we're doing today. My goal in life is not to be able to recite poetry on a dime perfectly, beautifully, etc. It just simply isn't. Is it fun? You better believe it is. It is fun. But I allow myself to just relax through any mistakes that I might make because it's just not simply my goal, right? I would maybe more be happy to be able to work on a goal like flawlessly singing my little Sanskrit songs without a mistake. But I don't think that I'm going to, go around collecting an audience of people who just are dying to hear me sing in Sanskrit. So that's not a goal either. But from a meditation perspective, it's more of a goal because there's great meditation outcomes from being able to not sort of blip in the same way that I blipped now with Shakespeare, with Edgar Allan Poe, etc. But one line that always comes a little bit easier for me is the opening of the Iliad because I say it a lot more often. The larger point, though, is not the ability to recite poetry, but it's how practicing some memorization of poetry and some theatrical and dramatical practice at some point in your life for an extended period of reciting poetry, which I have done, helps you over time and helps you get through that. And then having the balls, so to speak, hope that's not a censorable word, rain down on us with all the algos, but having some practice reciting things in public is a very good thing. And then if you practice that, you'll be free. So I think you have all the tools that you need, and I hope that helps. And I don't know that there are any books I would recommend on these matters, except for if you do your research. I'm sure you'll find an abundance of them, and then you can see which of those recommendations make the most sense. All right, does that help? I hope so. Let me know in the chat, or if you have any more questions around that, please let me know. This is your chance to ask questions. If you're here and joining us and something's on your mind, let me know in the chat. Hit that thumbs up if you're just joining us. Get subscribed if you are new here. And if you're watching the replay, all those things apply. Thumbs up. Get involved in the discussion underneath the replay. There's a link repository for you in the description that gives you all kinds of resources that you'll want to follow up on. And I will think of some books if things come to mind, but I think already learning unconscious communication from Dr. Lings will do great things for you. All right, so let's get into memory techniques. Amjad is in the house. Good to see you, Amjad. Thanks for being here. One of the number one memory techniques that you can do that I absolutely love, can never practice enough, but I'm quite good at it, is just give places to things. So my keys, my wallet, my sunglasses, they all go in the same place. All the time, every time. Almost every time. Everything's always almost every time. But I'm very, very consistent with this. So, do I ever have this panic in my life of where did my keys go? Yes, once in a while. But it is so freeing and peaceful to just know where my keys are. It is so freeing and peaceful to just know where my glasses are. And then, if they're not there, then we have a real emergency in life, and we warrant our drama queenness because we're normally so good about this, right? But overall, it's so freeing. It's so freeing to just give places to things, right? So those are just some simple examples. But give places to your memory practice as well. So I told you a whiteboard was going to come up again. This is not Adolfo's whiteboard, but another whiteboard from Christian, I believe. And he's got a number of memory palaces that he shared in our mastermind group for different memory palaces that are on a whiteboard. So yes, those will be washed away. You can take a photograph of them, store them, which is giving a place to your memory practice, to your memory work. But inside of a room, having a whiteboard to work with, and I've got one just right under there that I pull out to work on. This is giving a place to your memory practice, right? And this is very, very important. It's so important. Same thing with memory, or sorry, wrong book, but same thing with your journals. Have a place for the stuff that you do and have it big, bold, visible, beautiful in your space so that you do not forget your commitment to improving your memory. This is a memory technique. It's what you might call a nestic memory technique because it is a technique that helps you remember to remember, right? So have that there. Very, very important. And know the difference between internal and external mnemonics, right? So planners, graphic organizers, apps, journals, etc., they do not encode like mnemonics unless you make them encode, right? So I sometimes will encode things mnemonically in this particular journal, and there's a way to make it mnemonic, but it is in itself not really a mnemonic when we, in the sense that we talk about memory techniques in terms of encoding with spatial memory and weaving it together with, elaborative encoding and all that sort of stuff. So know that difference. Be conscious of it. Practice the difference. Use the tools as they are best used. Optimize them. Think of how to fuse them, mix and match them. But also let things that have a place, right? And then also understand the difference between spaced repetition and creative spaced repetition, right? So just having a bunch of cards, you might think, oh, isn't that rote learning? And some people say, what's the difference? Why is this not rote learning? Well, repetition is not the enemy. Repetition will be needed. Why would you memorize anything that you're not going to repeat, right? So it's already got repetition built into it. We remember so that we might repeat. Don't avoid repetition. But rote is this sort of just looking at it again and again as if that's going to get it into memory. It'll have some effect, sort of, maybe. The research is always problematic because of how the research is done, but basically what you see is that people who just do some sort of serial positioning, spaced repetition that may have serial positioning in it, but rarely does, they'll get maybe a 40% recall. Whereas people who use elaborative encoding, which is the fancy science word for memory techniques that involve memory palaces and imagery and associations like that, these people have like 88% accurate recall. And it can be pushed to 95%, it can be pushed to 98%, it can be pushed to 99% relative to the goals, relative to the individual's fitness and practice with the techniques. Bam, like it's just amazing. And it's reliable, scientific. There's no sort of arguing about it. The only issue is, does the person actually do the work? Do they learn the techniques? Do they practice them sufficiently enough to get to any sort of significant level? And do they take the risk, right? Because it is risky to, even with a dry mouth, all of a sudden whip out some Shakespeare, and then they're going to be like, oh, that guy, he did blah, 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 he didn't hardly got it out of his mouth, right? Whatever. That's the risk that one takes. But the reality is, you will feel the joy, you will feel the bliss, but you've got to put in the practice. And then you've got little things like recall rehearsal, rule of 5, etc., etc. So all of this is all built into the magnetic memory method. There's other methods out there. I think that it's up to you to explore, but pay your dues to the one at a time principle and really understand the ins and outs, not only from studying in a dedicated way, but implementing in a dedicated way, and practicing in a dedicated way. You'll get much more out of that than jumping from here to over there and a little bit of this, a little bit of that. The next thing you know, you'll look back over 5-10 years and you'll think, where did all the time go? I still don't understand how to use these techniques. Well, if that happens to you, I'm sorry, but it's never too late. It's never too late to start again from foundational, fundamental principles and get into a full training. I recommend, unbiased, the Magnetic Memory Method, and you can get started over at magneticmerrymethod.com if you like. All right, so another memory technique is acronyms. So if you go and you read all that stuff on memorizing a speech that I recommended to AG there a little bit earlier, you can learn some stuff about using acronyms in that context. Acronyms are super powerful. I just used one actually from memory. I said you should study and you should implement and you should practice. That's coming from a deep memorization of things that I want to be able to say in that order for particular purposes, which is the SIP principle. Take it one sip at a time. S-I-P, study, implement, and practice. And I didn't, at that moment, on purpose, use the actual acronym out loud because I knew my next point was going to be to talk about acronyms. And then I would talk about how that I went through that process in order to do that. And so one of the things that I did to help myself remember many of the talks that I've given is the acronym technique, because instead of memorizing everything word by word, which is not necessary, you can just memorize little acronyms. It's a powerful memory technique. It's so wonderful when used in context. So remember previously on our session today, I said 2 things that you should never forget. Content is king, but context is God, right? And what that means is that, yes, you might need to memorize a speech, or you might need to memorize something that you need to relate verbally. That's the content, and it is governing certain things. But the context is really the thing to pay attention to, because a lot of people, they scare themselves, they chase themselves out of something that could be so much simpler by understanding the context. So there are certain times when you give a talk where people don't want to listen to something that's just pre-memorized and pre-packaged and so forth. They don't want it to be smooth like that. They don't want it to be potentially stilted, as I hope my TEDx was not. But that was the risk of doing it that way. And we'll see what the video looks like. I have no idea. I have no opinion. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Obviously, we would like it to be a success. But the point is that there's a risk, and you have to think about context, and you have to hedge your bets, and you have to do things appropriately, right? So all of which is to say, content is king, for sure, but context is God, and pay your dues to both. Render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and render unto God what belongs to God. Who knows that one? All right. So that's a strategy. I'm going to catch up with Mr. Space's chats here in a minute, but let's carry on with memory expertise. Know your memory experts. This is one of the most powerful memory technique strategies in the world. Be a student of the craft. So I can't do an eternal list, but know your Ebbinghaus. Know Bruno first. Now, is Bruno I got to try to pronounce this probably first. First, I think. I'm not. I'm not sure. I haven't heard a German pronounce it. But in any case, you'll see it with an umlaut. You'll see it without an umlaut. And the reason why I have question marks here is because I think that the German word first is prince. And so I've always looked at Bruno first and thought, what game is he playing? Is that really his name? I really don't think so. I think he's referring to Giordano Bruno, but I don't know. In any case, it's a pretty weird coinkydink that he would have the name Prince, essentially, or however that might be translated. But anyway, I'll try to make a mental note to ask a German speaker about that very soon. Harry Lorraine, Dominic O'Brien, Lynn Kelly, Ron White, Jim Quick, Superlearner, whatever. More contemporary up-and-coming names. Anastasia Wolmer, she was on the podcast last week. If you missed the episode, go and check it out. Know these people. Be part of this world. Gobble it down. Know Francis Yates. Don't just read books by Francis Yates. Read about Francis Yates. It's fascinating. It's amazing. It's wonderful. It does so much for your brain. It's a technique. It is a memory technique. You're going to think about the techniques in context, right? Because remember, context is God. And remember that the magnetic memory method incorporates all of this into one smooth process. And it's the smoothest of it of all, because it's not telling you it's the be-all and the end-all. It's helping you to understand how you become the be-all and the end-all by correctly structuring your mind so that you might continue to correctly structure your mind and your memory and have that smooth outcome, and to be relaxed and ease into it and recover when you falter, and do it all without ego getting in the way, because ego is what's going to get you in the end if you let it. And until you have a proper approach to it that gets this all formulated and smooth and so forth, all the rest, I could be wrong, but I just don't see it addressing the highest possible order up front and first. As you learn the foundational memory techniques, how are you going to get your ego out of the way and be magnetic so that you attract what really matters? You push away what doesn't matter, which includes fear, which includes anxiety, which includes stress, at least negative stress, because there are some positive stresses, as we saw today, that we want to invite for neurochemical benefits, at least so it seems to me in my research. And we want to have all of this wound around. Beautiful, beautiful. So that when we do take other memory courses, it clicks. We can extract the value from it. And you know what? It has a beautiful retroactive effect, which is this. Every memory training you've already taken will suddenly be so much more rewarding. And you won't regret all that time that you spent not getting it yet, because now you'll have the basis to get it and understand it and go through all that stuff, and it'll 10 times all that value. The only flaw is human error. And believe me, I've got human error too. And all of this took much longer than it needed to because I had to figure it out for myself. And that's why I created the course, to help others speed up the process. And lo and behold, it seems to be working. And one of the reasons why it's working is because we keep improving it, keep listening, helping, so forth. And somebody said, if you did this, you would reduce the amount of questions that you're getting. And I said, well, no. A business tries to eliminate questions. A university makes sure that the questions keep coming. So there are things that you might improve, but you've got to be careful about what improvement is, because preempting questions is what a faceless corporation tries to do in order to reduce the costs of support and all that sort of stuff. But a university that cares about the students tries to make sure that the questions keep on coming. And we'll have something at the end of this that will prove to you, or at least demonstrate and validate just how important that principle is for the betterment of all, in a moment. So, your goals as a memory strategist are to remove cliches from your life. So, work smarter, not harder. You hear this all the time. Is this true? Stress test the cliches. Some cliches have a role to play. Some cliches are really powerful and useful. Content is king. Context is God. So every time these cliches come up, always stress test them. Is that really true? When is it true if it is true? Where is it true when it's true? How is it true? And usually what you'll find is that most cliches fall apart very, very quickly when context needs to be the God and the decider, not the content. And that's very, very important, because the reality is that so many people need to put in some effort in order to know how to work smarter. And that's why our goals are to be smarter, which means serious, mature, and ready to embrace reality. And the reality is that you gotta, at least at some point, adopt the correct mental model, which might be like some of the mental models we talked about before. You might not fit with the fighter pilot attitude. There can be all kinds of things where you go, I don't like that, and then you run away screaming, but that's allowing your like-dislike monster to rule the show. That's not what smarter people do. What smarter people do is they recognize that an opinion has appeared in consciousness. An emotional reaction has appeared in consciousness. That's my like-dislike monster. I'm going to be serious, mature, and ready to embrace reality, and I'm going to learn anyway. I'm going to put my opinions aside. I'm going to put my little, oh, poor me violin aside, and I'm going to get in there and I'm going to milk this of all the value that there is to be had, and we're going to rock and roll. And be all in, 100%, and be in it for life. So learn the magnetic memory method, and it will serve you for life. Now, I'm still going to share with you that book, that resource, and a special quote that's going to place all of this in context. But I also want to do a bit of FAQ. So I've got some FAQ prepared, but let me catch up with the chat beforehand. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, how things are going for you. Mr. Space says, for me, creating my own poetry is very helpful to remembering things and to imagine the action in the certain location that makes sense. Great, great, great. And you say, again on point, once I created images and am able to remember in my head. I noticed to keep them, I must keep reviewing them, otherwise I would forget. So if you need to keep reviewing your images, then I think a good solid review of the exercises page in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass would help you, because you should not need to review your images. Your images, once set up, should be like memory palaces, pretty good to go for the long haul. So I'm not sure what images you're creating, but one of the problems that we need to understand here is that the Magnetic Memory Method is not about creating images. So it removes all that nonsense. That's too much work. Why would you create anything? And anyway, only, and I'm not saying that you're doing this, Mr. Space, but only someone who is missing the program completely would ever see this as a creative exercise. This is not about creativity. This is about effective use of your mind as it is right now and removing creativity, because creativity is too much work and it's not even possible. All right? So this is why the exercises page is there. Those who make sure to really, really go through this and understand it realize, I've been doing all this hard work, and that's why that I'm suffering from the mnemonic practice so much. You do not need to do work. Memory techniques are not about doing work. If you're doing work, you're reading the wrong books from the wrong people, and maybe you're just not understanding it. I don't know. But the reality is that this is not work. There may be some effort involved, but heck, eating chocolate and kissing, effort, but not work. All right, so I would be curious why that you are creating images in the first place. And so you should not need to review the images themselves. The images should be magnetic, and that means that you didn't create them, and you couldn't create them because they're not yours to create, and you don't have to memorize them. So many memory trainings are all about memorizing all kinds of lists and stuff like this. Remember so that you might remember. Look, there's a time and place for that, but it's not for learning. You don't need to do that. That's not a waste of time, but it's not the magnetic memory method. And so many people are influenced by the memory competitors, and that's fine. And there's use for it. There's a time and place for it. But the reasons why that they're building those systems, which require way more setup than is needed, and why they're rigid and fixed in so many ways, has to do with winning prizes so that you can then forget all the stuff that you memorized to win the prize instantly. Well, we don't want that. At least I don't. And most of the people who come here, they want to remember it for life. They want to have access to that. So you've got to approach the techniques differently. You've got to use them differently. And you've got to use them in a way that you're not forgetting your imagery. Because if you're forgetting your imagery, then that's not good. So let's fix that for you, Mr. Space. Get in touch somehow, or just go through the exercise. Go through the master plan again. It's very, very powerful to review these things and make sure that that one is switched on to the real teaching. And tell me if I made a mistake. I will go in and I'll fix it. But again, it's not it's not a fantasy I have of removing all questions or mistakes. It's a thing of making sure that we correct course for each and every individual as much as possible, and that we constantly communicate the process and the means by which that will happen. And usually the answer is to review the course every once in a while to make sure that you're up with the updates that have been made and that you're actually doing the magnetic memory method, because sometimes people aren't, and they'll still sometimes get great results. It doesn't have to be exactly as described. And if you know the magnetic memory method, you know that there is no exactly as described, because this is teaching you to create your own systems and to reduce the cognitive load that so many other memory trainings create in the production of systems. We're getting rid of this. This is very, very important. We're reducing it to the lowest possible amount. And I received a beautiful email from someone recently who just said, "Man, you were right. If we just do it this way, wow." But they let their mind start thinking about all these possible implications and mathematical consequences of doing it this way and that way. No one's talking about this. Yes, those thoughts will come, but there are tools to help you manage the thoughts, and it's the management of those thoughts that makes the biggest difference. All right, so Mr. Space says, got it. All right, so I'll stop jamming on this and move on. D.A. Lit says, but I'm glad you got it, Mr. Space. That's wonderful. D.A. Lit says, reminds me of my first memory course, Kevin Trudeau's Mega Memory. In fact, it influenced me to move on to MMM. Yeah, Trudeau, poor old Trudeau, he's gotten a bad rap from people who have some logical issues in their thinking. They think that because a guy in a completely different area did some stuff that is, of course, very bad, has something to do with his memory training. That's a critical thinking error. That's straw manning somebody. The reality is that his memory training has very little to do with Trudeau. What it has to do is with memory training. And any and all crimes, will never sully it in any way. And woe to that person who would misattribute the individual with the teaching. He's even got some other teaching that is kind of weird, but it still has a few good things in it. And if you have discernment enough to go through it and extract the value and allow yourself to just, oh yes, that's kind of a weird idea. You can get so much out of so many things if you just stop judging it. So I'm glad you mentioned Trudeau. I didn't put him on that list. I didn't think to, but he should actually be, someone should try to do something to at least exonerate him on the basis of it doesn't have anything to do with him. So pretty much everything that he refers to is in the public domain, and it is based on ancient knowledge. And he actually, for his historical time, teaches it. I mean, I don't know if it stood the test of time. It's been years since I went through it, but for his audience at that time, it's quite a good training, actually. So, woe to those people who poo-poo things that they've never gone through and criticize things and let their like-dislike monster rule the game. We all do it from time to time, don't we? So, we have to have the wherewithal to laugh at ourselves because we all do it. All right. So Ash says, hi, any experience with self-hypnosis for improving the memory overall? Ash, yes, good question. And yes, I do. I've talked about self-hypnosis many times and even have a self-hypnosis blueprint in our self-improvement supercharger program. So let me know your questions around that, and be sure to get into the self-improvement program, but you might not need it. You say, I experienced huge memory boosts when I hypnotized myself, that I have a super memory. Well, I'd love to know more about what you did there, because hypnotizing yourself to have a super memory and then leading to a memory boost, what was that memory boost? How did you test it? Did you think you felt, or you actually did some tests? If so, what were the nature of the tests, and why was it from the hypnosis? So one of the things that I'm very clear about in my own self-hypnosis blueprint is don't delude yourself. Actually test. Make sure. Self-hypnosis does not lead to better memory. It can't and it won't. At least not in any way that I know of. So if you can say otherwise, please do. Demonstrate it, validate it, describe it, discuss it. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't stand to reason. Not in any way that I understand self-hypnosis. Yes, I have a NGH certification, National Guild of Hypnotists, so I might be biased from experience and certification and have all those kinds of problems in my thinking. But at the same time, because I'm certified, I owe it to my fraternity to just dig in a little bit here to see what you're saying. Because we don't want to spread misinformation, and it is possible to delude oneself that it was the hypnosis that improved one's memory when it wasn't. The hypnosis might have done something else, which is what hypnosis usually is successful at doing, and that might have been the effect that helped you. But without more details from you, I don't know. But let's put a bookmark on that, and if you care to share more, please do. And if you do know hypnosis very well, then you probably already know the effects that I'm referring to, and that's the more likely reason. So let's keep that in mind. I don't sell any kind of self-hypnosis training that is anything but on the highest possible level of scientific validity that we can get. And here's what to get. The amazing Kreskin put it the best that I've ever heard, which is that persuasion, which is what hypnosis is simply, well, hypnosis, whatever, you could just switch those words around. But the definition of it is just simply the acceptance of a suggestion. So persuasion is just the acceptance of a suggestion. Hypnosis is just the acceptance of a suggestion. That's all it is, and nothing more. So what did you suggest to yourself? And then why would you attribute that as the thing that improves your memory? That's what we need to know. Typically, what hypnosis will do is not address a mechanical task like that in the way that one thinks it's addressing it. It will address it in a different way. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it now, but that's all available for you in the Self-Improvement Supercharger program. All right. Amjad says, history literature is okay, but I feel little work has been done on encoding mathematical equations through memory techniques. Amjad, thanks for that. Not true. So please make sure to go to the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass and go through the training on how to encode mathematical equations through memory techniques. Robert Adut, who is a very well-recognized memory expert, is in that training, and he shows you in a very detailed manner how he used it to memorize very difficult equations. So Amjad, your feelings are fine, but the facts don't play out. I was going to quote a certain somebody, but I won't, about facts and feelings. The reality is that this has been done. And if you do your research, you'll find that there's an abundance of material on how to memorize mathematical equations and how to encode them. You just need the training. So please avail yourself of what's available and do it sooner than later, because you will be leaving so much of treasure behind in terms of competence in using the memory techniques in this way. Heck, I'm not even that good at it, but on live streams, I've seen, formulas and memorized them, and it's not that difficult once you know how to do it. It's a challenge sometimes, but not that difficult. Venezia, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that properly, but Venetia is here, says, I appreciate your work, your great work. Thank you. Well, thank you for your great comment, Venetia. Good to see you. All right, so I had an FAQ prepared. People ask, memory strategies for adults. Well, memory strategies for adults, really, let's go back to that smarter principle. If you're serious, mature, and ready to embrace reality, then any of them will do inside of a cultivated understanding of what you truly want to achieve. So a huge part of today's message is have a large learning goal as the main memory strategy. And then inside of it, you're going to want to explore a lot of them and pick them based on the outcome that you want. Make the study of memory itself and memory techniques part of your program, and then you'll have a better ability to discern. And maybe I should republish and re-promote my consumer guide for memory trainings so that people can think this through with a little bit more critical thinking skills and pick the right one for their task so that they're actually getting the best possible memory training. Because, it might not be magnetic memory method. It might be something else. It depends on your goal. But if you don't figure out your goal, how can anybody guide you or direct you? So I might redo that, a new 2020 update of my consumer awareness guide, because it's probably fallen into a bit of disrepair. All right, so people ask memory strategies for kids. Well, I would say that, association and linking would be nice places to start. And then having it all done within the context of a dedicated and planned learning project. And dedicated and planned learning project not only means that you plan the project, but you plan when you're going to do it, how long you're going to do it for, what's the intended, key performance indicators that you got the result that you wanted, and then dive in and do it. And so, for example, the multiplication table. Teach the kids the mnemonics for the multiplication table. And you could just use a simple rhyme method. 2 times 2 equals 4. That's why we have 2 pairs of shoes by the door, right? 3 times 3 equals 6. That's why we have 2 piles of 3 sticks by that picture of Bill Hicks, right? And you should have a portrait of Bill Hicks in your house. If you don't, I don't, but you know what I'm saying. It's a joke. A mental picture of Bill Hicks. Probably you don't want to be teaching kids Bill Hicks stuff. So maybe there's another name that you could use. Whatever. The whole point is it's up to you to be the parent, learn for yourself the techniques, teach from experience, and then you won't be a weird dude like me who doesn't have kids who's like, yeah, Bill Hicks, that would be a good one for the kids. If you don't know Bill Hicks, then you're wondering, what the heck is so funny? But if you do, then maybe you'll have found that as funny as I do. I don't know. Another question I get is, how can memory strategies be taught? Well, this is just the same answer, right? Learn the strategies, but then learn how to teach. So there's something about learning how to teach. I will tell you right now, I am learning how to teach. I'm still not sure I know how to teach, which is probably a good sign, because these teachers who are so convinced that they know how to teach, They got a lot of learning to go. So refresher courses, I take courses on how to make courses. I learn to learn. I still upgrade my skills. I'm so inspired by one course I'm taking right now that may lead to some experiments where I try different things. It's going to be a lot of work, but in any case, there's lots of things going on, and I'm always aware of my limits as a teacher and trying to learn how to teach better. And one of the ways that you do it is you just practice, right? And practice in different environments, practice teaching in different ways, as many as you possibly can. Network Channel is in the house, says hello, Anthony. Hello, Network Channel. Good to have you here. Thanks for being here. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, and what you're thinking. Anyway, one of the things I would say is if you're going to start learning the strategies so that you can teach them, encourage research and implementation skills. So I said I was going to give you a quote that winds all of this together, and here it's coming, right? Encourage research and implementation skills, because the number one thing that you're going to see when you teach people is that there's a kind of person, and it can be any person at any time in their life. So it could be me at a certain point in my life, and I try to catch myself when it happens using tools like the Fineman Technique, etc. But you're going to get people who just want a handout, who just want the answer fast, and usually there is no fast answer, right? So the best teachers are those who show you where to look, but don't tell you what to see, right? That's very, very important that you understand this. You've got to understand that you meet the teacher halfway. And if they're telling you what to see when you get there, then, I mean, that doesn't mean you go, oh, I heard you say what you need to see there, because that is a phrase I often say, is like what you should perceive there, or what you want to notice there. Don't be lost in the surface of what words mean. The whole point is that the teacher should be enabling you to be your own teacher as quickly as possible, right? And if they're failing to do that, then, that's on them. But some teachers you learn from anyway, because teachers are teachers, and you've got to understand that everything is a teacher. Everything is teaching you. If you wake up, you switch on, you'll realize that it's all teaching you something all the time, right? But good teachers, they may show you where to look, but they don't tell you what to see. So this is something to sort of understand, and it can frustrate you, but teachers can't do it for you, right? But the ones that do often are crippling you and leading to learned helplessness, and that's a very sad thing. On to the next Q&A that I often see is, which are the least efficient memory strategies so I can just focus on the most efficient ones? Oh, efficiency. Learn the difference between efficiency and effectiveness, okay? Because things that are effective aren't always efficient. Don't make efficiency the holy grail. You've got to be careful about efficiency. It can be a trap. Effective is not always efficient, right? And so I told you I was going to give you the book, the Kingpin book. So if you stuck around for that, read this. Read it and read it well. It's just an amazing, amazing book. It's called Cluj, and it's by Gary Marcus, The Haphazard Construction of the Human Mind. Your brain is the most inefficiently structured thing in the world. And a lot of people, they say, oh, evolution has found this thing, or it was all created perfectly, and all this sort of stuff. No, and 1,000 times no. Evolution is not a thing that thinks. Evolution is not efficient. It's not even aware of itself, right? There's no evidence that it's aware of itself. And this is the hard solipsism that emerges in something like Giordano Bruno and the memory tradition. And if you can just resolve yourself to it, you'll be so free. You'll be so free. The world is not intelligent. Intelligence is a word that humans created in order to describe what's going on. But if the brain and evolution was somehow intelligent, it would look very, very different if it was designed. No. The problem is, and the solution is to just understand that it just is the way that it is, And any honest and ethical analysis of it shows that there's no intelligence at all. And so this clamoring after efficiency, this longing, this Sehnsucht, as the Germans would say, after efficiency, is just a lost cause. You need to go for what's effective, for what's true. And you need to embrace it. And as Nietzsche says, say yes. Say yes. It is our fate to be inefficient. But we can be effective by being inefficient anyway when it's needed. Content is king. Context is God. Love your fate. Amor fati. But don't just love it, not merely to bear what is necessary, but to love it. But to love it, right? And it is necessary to reconcile yourself to the inefficient construction of the human body, the inefficient construction of the brain, and see the miracle of just how high performance it is, despite that fact. But don't delude yourself into thinking that some intelligence is behind it. No, well, I haven't been struck dead by lightning, so blasphemy may continue. All right, so a next question that we get is that, well, if there were ones that were efficient, what would they be? Just tell me anyway. No, the best ones are the ones that you're actually going to use, okay? So please make sure that you select intelligently and then use them. And then know that the ones you're actually using certainly are the best because they're the ones that you're using. And then upgrade over time. Because that's the next question that I get, is how do you improve your use of memory strategies over time? And practice itself will reveal the answer. But we've already talked about self-consciously choosing mental models, right? And so when you self-consciously choose mental models, that will help you refine the process of improving, right? So we talked about Nereal, we talked about Nietzsche, we talked about all these different ways of thinking about choosing mental models, fighter-pilot attitude, or the more performance-based, it's going to burn. There's a very good video that I linked you to down below from James Clear, Atomic Habits, how to get 1% better every day. So, he says it's just a numbers game and, think about the math and all that sort of stuff. Well, it's not just that there is math, but accepting, adopting, etc., a 1% better every day mental model is part of how you improve. You just accept the model. And, he is now in the glorious position of defending 1% every day, because some people will scratch their heads and they'll go, well, that doesn't actually stack up because 1% of this and 365 days of that, and isn't that actually 400,962% or whatever? And it's just like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. But the whole point is listen to what is actually being said here, right? It's the adoption of a mental model to granularly focus and tighten so that you can perceive the path and what the path reveals to you about how you might improve. So it's again that SIP. Take it one step at a time. Study, implement, practice. That will reveal so much about how to improve. Just being consistent will be the way to improve. But you've got to change. You've got to tweak. You've got to be in the game. You've got to be in the game. And if you're not in the game, then you're screwed, right? Which leads to another question. Well, okay, I get all that, but where do I start? Sorry for a hard answer. Not trying to evade it, but just get started. There are at least 4 learning types. Now, some people say, oh, the learning types, there's no science behind this. Well, yes and no. And in some cases, we can't rely on science the way that people think science is. We have to be the scientist, right? And so test this out for yourself. That's what real science is saying, is this true? Then running experiments to see if it's true. And one of the things to think about is 4 learning types. Okay, so there's the kind of person who is like, I need to know what this is before I can proceed. The history, etc. There's the person who needs to, I need to know why it works. I'm never going to try this if I don't know why it works. Some people need to know how it works. I'm not going to try this if I don't know how it works. And then there's the person who's just like, forget all that stuff. Give me the action steps. I'm ready to go. The thing is, we're all like that in certain ways with different things. There's like a little configuration that happens, and you might be this way. You might be a how type for plumbing. Oh, how does plumbing work? I better know all this before I turn the wrench. whereas you might be a why it works before you get into memory techniques. Memory techniques is like plumbing, apparently. I've heard it said. But in any case, you've got to see where you get hung up in this and transcend. Turn all of this into powers. So, if you catch yourself getting caught up in the how, then switch. See if you can get past that and just get started and focus more on the why if that helps you get started. It's just find your dials. Twist them, test them for yourself. There definitely are learning types, I'm sure of it, because I have perceived them in myself and seen them so many times with so many people, and this helps them get past their hangups. It helps get past perfectionism. Where you should start is at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT with the free course if you haven't got it. Where you should start if you already have the masterclass is with the Start Here page, and then in the master plan, and then in the exercises page, and then the study guide, and then the FAQ, and then from there it's your sort of own journey. But you could also just use your own adulthood and your wherewithal to maybe craft your own path. It doesn't have to be that way. And no matter how many signs and indicators and do this, do that, and that sort of, some people are just going to do it their own way, right? And that's okay too. There's a place for that in the world. Rasmus, my man! Long time no see. Long time no see. Trade, right? If memory serves. With an umlaut for the A, I think. Anyway, does that make sense? Everybody's being a bit quiet here. Let me know in the chat if all this is making sense for you. And, again, think of that mental model sort of stuff. This is a mental model, the 4 learning types, as a kind of tick, 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 tick. You can actually self-consciously rotate through a series of self-reflective questions that help you determine, what am I stuck in, right? What's stopping me from getting started? And then if you're going to get started, if you just need the law, well, go to magneticmemorymethod.com, get started, go to the masterclass, start on the Start Here page. I mean, it's all as clear as it's going to get. Do it in that order as I suggest there. And then, that's how to do it. Why that it works? You can spend the rest of your life reading memory science. They don't even know where consciousness is in the brain. And they say a bunch of stuff about memory, and it's great, but they don't know why we have memory. They don't even know why we think in the first place. It's just that we do, right? So we can let a lot of that stuff go. We can let a lot of the why it works go. We just know that it's worked for a very long time. I mean, this is a long time. I don't have it right nearby, but Lynn Kelly's The Memory Code goes even deeper into history. If you know evolution, you know that it still persists because it helps humans. That's why it works. It works because it helps humans. So wherever you're hung up, Rasmus says, yes, that is tree in Swedish. Amazing memory. Well, thanks for being here, Rasmus, to give me a little bit of a reason to try a memory test. But I remember we were talking about that. I don't remember exactly how long ago it was, but my desk was definitely in a different position, so I'm hazarding a guess about 2 years ago. So the techniques work, my friends. They just simply work. All right. Jones says how to memorize Bible verses. Let's get to that in a second. And D.A. says he's just practicing focused listening. I love that. So if you guys fall silent in the chat, I won't assume that you're practicing focused listening, but indeed, that is a way to focus. And but let me know after. Come back and post on the replay page that's what you were doing. All right. So again, where should you start? If you're not going to dive into the memory training, as I strongly recommend right away, start with a mental metaphor for yourself. So if fighter pilot attitude isn't right for you, pick one that is right for you. Figure out the kind of person that you want to be. Know that top performers always work on their memory, the structural organization of their mind, and dive in and work on those things. And at least give this a good old college try. And just understand the brain game that you're really playing, okay? What you're really playing here is not about your opinion. It's not about your personality. It's not about this little person, named Anthony, in my case, who thinks that there's a guy named Anthony. It's about your brain chemistry, right? All of this is habit formation. If you would just show up long enough and consistently enough for the habits to form, you're just going to start doing these techniques on autopilot. Autopilot. Very, 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 very important to do that. So again, memory is the ability to recall things on demand because you've been able to store them on demand or sometimes unconsciously and on an autopilot way. And then strategy is the science and the art of accomplishing goals. When you have enough strategies in place, you're going to be absolutely thrilled by the ability to walk into rooms, memorize the names of all the people, by the ability to take a bunch of language learning tasks and memorize vocabulary and phrases, by looking at formulas and memorizing the formulas if that's what you need. And all of this is going to work so much more smoothly when you have a vision for your life and you have a long-term learning goal to create a large enough foundational field into which the seeds can actually fall and capture, get purchase in order to grow this wonderful, marvelous garden of your mind of knowledge and wisdom that leads you to make better decisions in life, that leads you to be more competent in your job and your career so that you can actually have a chance at retiring one day and, just looking back at the end of your life and saying, I made it. I made it. I made it. Yay! I won, And then, you feel good. You feel good. You don't have that horrible feeling. You're looking back over your deathbed and you're plagued with all these bad memories of, oh, I wish I would have. No. You're free from that. You're free because you did it. You did it. All right. A lot of people ask how they can support this. If you want, we now have enabled tier memberships on the channel. Please check that out. Sharing a video with you in the chat all about that. And that's much appreciated if you want to become a channel member. Also, I want to remind you that Jonathan Levy and I of Super Learner fame have released the first episode of our new podcast. I'll share that with you in the chat. For those of you already on the street team, if you haven't seen it yet, I've given the cover reveal, the title reveal. We've gone through the memory palace that I created out of the audiobook studio and many more wonderful things there waiting for you. Soon we'll have an extract from the audiobook just for street team supporters. So go on over there. It doesn't cost anything to be on the street team. So that's great. And also we are going to have some upgrades to the masterclass once I get this video back and do a walkthrough for you of the TEDx that I did, how I memorized it, and did a pretty damn good performance, I think, but I haven't seen the video yet, so leave that to be corrected later. I could be quite horribly self-critical later, but one way or the other, we'll talk about how I did it. And also want to shout out again to Nelson Dellis and his new Memory Superpowers initiative that's coming out soon, an adventurous guide to remembering what you don't want to forget. Make sure you support him by getting that book when it comes out. Yeah, I know you're thinking, oh, but I need to get your book. And it's like, just get books about memory, support it. Make sure this tradition thrives and lives. Be a protector. That's what we do in this community, is we protect memory and we make sure that it lives on and reaches as many people as possible. All right, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Go to Nelson's channel, make sure you're a subscriber, etc. Again, going to be doing stuff around this a little bit more in the future. Already mentioned it. Jonathan and I have this new initiative. If you want to learn about memory and creating your own little empire about it, then make sure you're in that world as well as this one. And stay tuned for releasing some material with Michael Swain, and you will be seeing this thumbnail go out live on YouTube soon with a video. I'm not sure exactly how soon, and this won't be the first one you see with him, but I think it's certainly the most dramatic. I think this will be number 3 or 4 of his videos, but please engage with them. Even if it's not your topic, you're going to learn so much just by seeing it through a different lens. So, go, well, I don't like that topic. That's the like-dislike monster. Learn from it. And of course, obviously, it helps us continue doing more stuff for you because it helps grow the channel. And I want to have more apprentices, so to speak. And so if when you see that stuff, or even in advance, you're interested in the apprenticeship, then get in touch. There's going to be a few people over time that are going to be part of this wonderful initiative, helping out, and I can't wait. So if you have any questions, pop them in the chat now. I'm just going to review, see what I might have missed here, and let's see here. I got some questions that I got to catch up with. If you have questions, pop them in. Now is your chance as I scanned through and make sure I didn't miss anything. So Talks had asked when my book is coming out. I answered that, but looks like April 30th will be the release date. Hopefully we can stick with that. And let's see here. Boom, 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 boom. This is the song to make sure that there's no radio silence. No radio silence at all. If we had radio silence, oh my God, what would we do? Okay, so we already answered that question. This is the anti-radio silence song. Okay, so Jones had asked how to memorize. Oh, no, there was one before from Amjad. If we create unrealistic images in memory techniques to remember facts and revisit them often, wouldn't they interfere with reality? And what will their effect be on personality? Oh, Amjad, great questions. I love what you're thinking about here. Okay, so first of all, if we create unrealistic images in memory techniques to remember facts and revisit them often, wouldn't they interfere with reality? Well, how do we define reality, right? And so what if they did? I want my memory techniques to interfere with reality, you know? Oh, yes, please interfere with reality. That's the whole point. Because the reality is if you don't use the memory techniques, you're almost guaranteed not to remember a damn thing, right? So I don't know what you mean by reality, but say more. But I think reality is precisely the thing to be interrupted here and interfered with. So, yeah, I don't even know where to go other than that, because that's the whole point. Reality is you won't remember without the techniques. So whatever distortions you're worried about, don't be. You know, that's what makes it memorable, right? And so what will be their effect on personality? Well, I'm glad you asked that, because part of the whole thing here with Giordano Bruno and the art of memory, part of the thesis that I think is correct is that we want it to make our personalities better. Because Bruno said, look, the path here is to become a highly competent person who's able to deal with whatever life throws at you in an appropriate way, non-self-delusional, right? So he said some things, and he may himself have been deluded about some things, as most of us are, and certainly one must be, because there's an irrational aspect to the world, right? It was Aldous Huxley who said, what was it? To be in a totally, what was it now? I memorized it for my TED Talk, but now I've just gotten my TED Talk out of my head, so I can't quite totally remember it, but it'd come to me if I focus on it. Maybe if I get a drink. I know what it was. A totally unmystical world would be a world totally blind and insane. That's what it was. A totally unmystical world would be a world totally blind and insane. I wonder if I actually said it properly in the TEDx. I don't know. We'll see on the video. But in any case, that's what it was. And so what we want to sort of understand is that these are just words, mystical, realistic, etc. They appear in the screen of our perception. And what is real, right, is something that we never really get to know, right? Because all we know, if we're really honest, truly, brutally honest about it, the only thing that we really know for certain is that this is appearing. And this is it, right? That's all we get to know. And so then the question is, we're thrown things at us, things are thrown at us, and our ability to deal with it is better when we have a trained mind. And that's the Bruno thesis, right? But the only thing you really can know is that this is just it, right? So worrying about things interfering with reality, let's step back and be honest about what reality really is. Blah, 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 words, 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 coming out of this. There's this guy, he thinks that he's talking, and he thinks that he was born in a certain year, and he thinks that and that, and this book is filled with words and all this sort of stuff. No, 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 and 1,000 times no. Yes, that appears to be happening, right? But what's really happening is that it's just something appearing in consciousness, and its appearance in consciousness is gone the instant that it happens. And you don't know what's going to happen next. But your fitness, your ability to deal with it, and to have a memory that is ready to produce what you need, even if you fiddle a little bit, right? A totally unmystical world would be a world totally blind and insane, right? You get it back, you find it, and you wonder, oh, memory. That's what this is. This is memory. But no, memory is just a word appearing in consciousness. And all that fitness, all that ability of your memory to pull things from where? Into the now. That is distorting and interfering with reality, Amjad. That is exactly what you want. It's so clear. Okay, so what will be the effect on the personality? Well, the effect on the personality is, look at how happy I feel. Look at all the people who you see. Harry Lorraine, the great master of memory. Is he real? I don't know, but there's this guy, and he's so happy. Have you ever seen him perform magic? There's pictures of him in his twilight years. An old man, still good with his memory, doing magic tricks. Yeah, as a fellow card slinger, I can see he's gotten a little bit sloppy with his cards and so forth. But oh my God, he's in bliss. He's doing card tricks for people. Paul Gertner is there. Wow! I mean, it's so amazing. This is what happens to your personality. You live until you die, and every moment you are switched on. Look at Tony Buzan. He was just in bliss. Why? Because by accident? Hell no. The whole world is stacked against you. Chance is throwing slings and arrows at you every minute, right? I got more problems than you can imagine, stacking up. Bam, ba bam, ba bam, ba bam, ba bam, and yet I just feel so good. And yeah, I sometimes can't get, words out of my mouth because my mouth is dry. I got all kinds of issues going on with, oh man, we could be here all day talking about the problems I got right now with my mouth, my teeth, all kinds of stuff. But it's just happening. It's just here, appearing in consciousness. And I still managed to get back some stuff that I remembered, thanks to just being a discipline of the art of memory. Beautiful stuff. So Amjad, put those worries aside. Please, 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 please. Jones says, how to memorize Bible verses. Well, the same way that you memorize quotes from Aldous Huxley. It's just one word at a time, and then you learn progressively how to memorize multiple words at a time, and you practice. You have proper memory palaces created in advance in such a way that is suitable for the memorization of verses. You become a follower of the Magnetic Memory Method podcast. You make sure that you've listened to the episode with Mike McKinley and how he used the Magnetic Memory Method. He perceived deeply what the Magnetic Memory Method is, and he then put it into work, and then he memorized so many Psalms, for example, and he focused on the Psalms. So, everything that we talk about today about having a lifelong learning goal, focus and attention leads you to be able to memorize Bible verses. If you want to memorize the numbers, then you're going to need to make sure you have a system for memorizing numbers. If not, then just memorize the actual text. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. So I hope that answers your question. You can search that up, and I would take, after you've done the master plan in the masterclass, take the course on memorizing poetry. Yes, it's not called How to Memorize Bible Verses. Same thing. Then you would take the numbers course to help you memorize numbers if you wanted the verses. So that's what I would suggest that you do. Austin says, do you have any tricks for remembering concepts instead of just facts? Austin, thanks for asking that question. That's a very, very good question. Now, why do you think that concepts are any different than anything else? The first step to memorizing concepts is to stop thinking that concepts are different. They're not different. What is a concept? Anybody can jump in and define what a concept is. If the answer is anything other than something that I talk about in words, then go back and figure out what the real game here is. There is no concept that cannot be expressed in words. Not that I'm aware of. There are some words that are used to point to things that, you can experience without words, but then we use words to express those concepts, right? So in German, for example, Notgeil, that's a concept. However, how would I explain Notgeil? Well, I would then use some words to describe it. So instead of getting hung up on how do I memorize concepts, I would just notice that all concepts are expressed in words. Then I would memorize the words and just know that when I talked about those words, as they came out of my mouth, I would be expressing the concept. Does that make sense? People think that there's a difference in information that isn't there. They think, oh, well, how am I going to memorize formulas? How indeed? You're just going to memorize them using tools appropriate to the task. They're not different except for in a sense of degree and level of exposure, etc., and your fitness with the techniques. But a symbol like a parenthesis is only different from the letter C because you've decided that it is. It's only a little bit different than this shape because you've decided that it is. There are so many. Oh, you say Danke, so maybe you know what I mean by Notgeil. I mean, the Germans have many, many concepts, right? But they're all expressible in words. But just think about how it is that your ego is making the problem of differentiation, when in fact, all things are at a basic level the same. What is it in Greek? Megason topos apentagarchori. Teles, right? Space is ultimate because it contains all things. That's very revelatory if you really think about the memory tradition and how it works. Space is where all this is happening. And where exactly is difference? Where exactly is separation? There is no separation, my friends. It's in your mind. All you have is a screen, and all that appears in that screen is yours and yours alone. You are what you seek, and your ability to memorize it all is just a matter of training yourself to stop seeing difference and make it one, make it the same, make it connect, because it was always already connected. You just didn't know how to see it because you didn't prepare yourself for the art of memory, the real art of memory. The art of memory that is new every time you use it, because it is the great destroyer of difference. And it is the great magnet that shows you that it's always, already connected. You just couldn't see it. But you can make it so. Zoom! Lasers, just like we see right here. Zoom! Now this is a bit of virtual science. This is a bit of chemistry. This is a bit of alchemy, you might say, almost alchemy. But it's the true way to understand it, if there is a true way at all. And already those who have eyes to see and ears to hear know that there is no way, because it's already just happening, all right? So train yourself to be, as Bruno said, prepared in the moment to deal with it. And that's why you build your memory systems. That's why you train. That's why you study, you implement, you practice, so that you can use your memory in the right way, in the right moment, even when you make a mistake, right? As they say, the true path of the samurai is to be prepared to execute any last move, even with your head cut off. And you'd better believe that there are going to be moments when your head is cut off so bad you don't know how you're going to stitch it back on. But if you're prepared, it'll already have been stitched back on even in your absence, because that's the path of the samurai. All right, D.A. Lit says, I was thinking that I would listen to this session in a concentrated manner and then listen to the replay and work on the principles from your note-taking video. Am I being inefficient? Not at all, my friend. If that's how it plays out, that's how it plays out. And the real goal is to enjoy every moment and know that what you take away from it, what you remember from it, is relative to your fitness to accomplish those goals that you've set in advance. Okay? So that's that. That's how that works. I'm sorry if I missed any of the questions that may have come up here. And I hope we didn't get too into the weeds of the seemingly philosophical, the seemingly mystical, the seemingly strange. But I want you to understand that so much of why you forget and why you suffer, why I suffer, is because we forget. We forget that this is all just what it is in the screen. And our ability to perform, to enjoy, to be the ocean, as Nietzsche says, in Also sprach Zarathustra, is all about how we treat every moment. And the more we treat every moment as it deserves to be treated, the more every moment to follow becomes better and better and better. I never used to believe that that was possible. But somehow I was fortunate enough to have enough hammers banging at me and enough tinkly little angelic bells that I listened and reduced the destructive hammers and increased the volume of the bells. And then one day I just woke up and away we go. I hope I never lose it. And I hope you never lose it too, because the reality is you've already got it. You probably just don't see it yet. And if you do see it, then congratulations, welcome home. Isn't it great here? It sure is. Thank you, everybody, for making today an exciting session. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed being here with you. Stay tuned, because I am going to release at least one video on the art of memory, part 1 of a series. I'll probably do, well, I'll do just as much as we get done to. There's no point in making too much of a big, hairy, ambitious goal. But if I do the whole series, I think it'll be about 15 videos to get through the book. It's something I would really like to do, but I also want to see that people want it. Otherwise, I could just keep all my notes to myself, which would be a sad thing indeed, because there isn't one. There is no me to keep anything. So let's see what the world brings. Sandra says, thanks. Thank you, Sandra. Great to see you here. And to all of those who are active, extra special thanks. And to all of those who will be active in the future, thanks. And to all those who are never active at all, thanks, thanks, thanks. Or as the great magician Daniel Madison says, thank you. I can't imitate him, but if I practice, maybe I'll get there. Thanks. I love how he speaks. He's great to hear. So if you're a magician and you're not following Daniel Madison, please do so. Tell him some crazy cat who loves memory said hello. Venezia says, we love your beautiful thoughts. Well, I love your beautiful thoughts too, Venezia. And I love your name. What a great name. I hope I'm pronouncing it even remotely clearly. Venezia. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for your comments today. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, one and all. And hats off to the great Christian Fitzharris, who helps remind us that it's all just a beautiful, beautiful game. Thanks, everybody. Come visit me at magneticmarymethod.com. And until we have a chance to speak again, keep yourself magnetic.
Let the games begin! I define, establish, exercise, and practice. Externalize spatial maps as I attack the path of mature learner. Bottle burner, max memory reserve, and earnest. I'm a furnace, an anomaly, sibling of Simonides known to reduce cognitive load. And oh, how I rotate, juggling space, making a case for brain games so digital amnesia leaves you. Digital dementia is censured. Did y'all tag Herenium on your mind wall? Review, recall, we will evolve. Brain games, synapses flashing, mind palace crashing with brain games. Info encoded, mental high roller. Brain games, synapses flashing, mind palace crashing with the brain games. Info encoded, mental high roller. This is not a game you can afford to lose. Why? Brain games, don't need an app for that. I just attack with the path of a lab rat. I mean scientist, I'm an annihilist, finalist, illuminist, numinous, doing this, proving this, who is this scholar? Dopamine fiend, clean sheen like the Pleiades, enemies, illities, killing with abilities, strolling with affinity, rolling with McKinney. Brain games, healthy snacks, build a palace, pick some facts, learn to balance while you rap, unleash talents, don't look back. brain games. Synapses flashing, mind palace crashing with the brain games. Info encoded, mental high roller. Brain games. Synapses flashing, mind palace crashing with the brain game. Info encoded, mental high roller.